Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is called Let the People Pick the President, The Case for Abolishing the Electoral College by Jesse Wegman. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 20. But what exactly can we do about the Electoral College? People have been trying to answer that question for more than 2 centuries. Since the first proposed amendment to the Electoral College was introduced in Congress in 1797, there have been more than 700 attempts to reform or abolish it, more by far than any other provision of the Constitution. Only one has succeeded, the 12th Amendment, which was ratified in 1804 to fix a technical flaw in the college's design, but left it otherwise intact. In the late 1960s, an amendment abolishing the college and replacing it with a national popular vote passed the House of Representatives and came extraordinarily close in the Senate, but was blocked by a filibuster. At the time, 80% of the American public supported switching to the popular vote, as did President Richard Nixon and other top Republicans and Democrats. To some, this litany of failures speaks to itself. I think it's a waste of time to talk about changing the Electoral College, former President Jimmy Carter said in 2000. Carter had supported a national popular vote in the 60s and the 70s. I would predict that 200 years from now we'll still have the Electoral College, he said. Was President Carter right? Is it simply our fate as Americans to remain trapped by the historical quirks of a Constitution that is too easy to revere and too hard to change? Especially after the failed effort in the 60s, when American politics were far less polarized to today and there was no simple partisan divide over the issue. It's clear that a constitutional amendment is not in the cards. But there may be another way. It's called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, an agreement among states to award all of their electors to the winner of the national popular vote rather than the winner of their statewide vote. The compact will take effect when it is joined by states representing a majority of electoral votes, 270, thus guaranteeing that the candidate who wins the most votes in the country becomes president. The ingenuity of the compact is that it doesn't touch the Constitution. Its target is the statewide winner-take-all rule, currently in use in 48 states. Maine and Nebraska are the exceptions. This rule is what makes presidents out of popular vote losers. It incentivizes presidential campaigns to ignore more than 100 million American voters living in non-competitive states, turning what should be a national electoral contest into a series of bitter, hyper-local brawls. It focuses nearly all campaign spending and policy proposals on a few so-called battleground states, where even a small shift in voting can lead to an electoral jackpot for one side or another. That familiar red and blue map we all obsess over every 4 years, it's nothing but a visual representation of state winner-take-all rules, with each state stamped Democratic or Republican, as though that is its true identity, regardless of how many voters from the other party cast a ballot there. This is bad for democracy, and it should concern all Americans, no matter where they live or which political party they support. In contrast, when candidates know that all votes are equal, and they need a majority of them to win, they're forced to seek the support of all Americans and craft policies that appeal to as many people as possible. The Popular Vote Compact was launched in 2006 and got its first member state, Maryland, the following year. As of October 2019, 15 states in the District of Columbia, together representing 196 electoral votes, had joined. 74 more, and the compact takes effect. So far, only Democratic majority states have joined the compact. And while the 2016 election dealt a significant setback to efforts to enlist Republican-led states, lawmakers of both parties around the country continue to support it, and Republican-led chambers have passed it in 4 states. Critics of the compact call it an end run around the Constitution. And it's true that the Constitution's framers never mentioned something like a popular vote compact. They also never mentioned the winner-take-all rule, but that didn't stop the majority of states from rapidly adopting it to benefit themselves. That's the whole point of the compact. The framers gave states near total control over how to allocate their electors. The fact that the compact is an agreement among states also means that, unlike a constitutional amendment, which is effectively permanent, member states may back out if they later decide they don't want to be a part of it. Opponents of the popular vote argue that no matter how you might achieve it, it's not the way our country is built. As the popular saying goes, we're a republic, not a democracy. The Electoral College is one of the core Republican elements of the framers' constitutional design, like the Senate and the Supreme Court, which are there precisely to prevent majorities from running rampant. In other words, majority rule is not our only organizing principle, and perhaps not even our most important. There are 2 problems, however, with this argument. The minor one is on the surface and involves terminology. The United States is both a republic and a representative democracy. The two terms describe the same thing, a government in which the people hold the ultimate power but elect representatives to make laws, policies, and other decisions on their behalf. The founders used the term republic to distinguish what they were building from a monarchy. For them, democracy generally referred to the direct variety, as in ancient Athens or the New England town meeting, where the people literally make the laws themselves. But American politics at the national level has never been and never will be a direct democracy. So any distinction between the terms today is meaningless. As one political columnist put it, to say that the U.S. is a republic and not a democracy is like claiming to eat beef and pork, but not cows and pigs. The bigger problem with the saying is the implication that lies beneath it. The book, Let the People Pick the President, by Jesse Wegman.
It's that time of year where we celebrate Memorial Day. We memorialize the Americans who have died in our wars, in the Vietnam War, in the Iraq War, in the Afghanistan War, in the Gulf War, the earlier Iraq War, in the Korean War. If you add all of those wars together that I just named, the sum total of them is fewer than the number of people who have died in 3 months from COVID-19 virus on Donald Trump's watch. Isn't it time for us to memorialize the Americans who have died and are continuing to die at the rate of, well over 1,000 a day as a result of the incompetence of Donald Trump? It seems like maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's the time to add COVID-19 victims. Because, after all, Trump says we're warriors, or maybe there should be a separate holiday. But something to think about. You'll find a video about it over at thomhartmann.com.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, Minneapolis is on fire. Literally still on fire. A lot of dimensions, a lot of pieces to this story that I want to touch on, and then I want to get into a little riff about right-wing media and its role in all this. I'm particularly interested in hearing from our listeners in Minneapolis. One of our larger stations, KTNF, is right there in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and AM 950. And your thoughts on what's going on. You look at times in our history, specifically even thinking of the American Revolution, when people felt like they were being oppressed, they were being killed, they were being, their lives were not being valued, and what did they do? They rose up. And if white people had been subject to regular police violence and killing and disproportionate imprisonment and job discrimination and all those kinds of things, year after year, decade after decade, don't you think that they would rise up, that they would raise hell? Oh yeah, that's right, they did in 1776. Anyhow, Jacob Frey, I think it's pronounced Frey, F-R-E-Y, the mayor of Minneapolis, has come out and said, I don't know why these guys aren't in jail. And it's like, yeah, I don't either. And maybe they will be today. We'll see. But Derek Chauvin, who is the specific cop whose photo was taken a month or so ago when Donald Trump was in Minneapolis with Donald Trump, smiling together. Oh, yeah, MAGA hats and all. That guy, he has just hired Tom Kelly. Tom Kelly is the lawyer who represented police officer Geronimo Yanez, who was acquitted in the murder of Philando Castile back in St. Paul, right across the river back in 2017. Shouldn't be any big surprise there. The other thing, though, that I find particularly interesting, and again, if you're in Minneapolis, I'd love to hear about this, if you have any insights into this, is this piece, this is over on Raw's Story by Gordon Green, and the headline, "They want their civil war. Far-right boogaloo militants have embedded themselves in the George Floyd protests in Minneapolis." George Floyd, of course, the man who was killed. This police officer, Derek Chauvin, Derek Chauvin sat with his knee on this guy's neck for what seems to be about 7 minutes, long enough to cut off the blood to his brain and kill him. Now, in the meantime, we've got, and I'll get back to the Boogaloo in just a minute. In the meantime, we've got Mayor Hal Marks of a town in Mississippi. I'm surprised, frankly, the article doesn't name the town, but in any case, he came out and said, if you can say you can't breathe, you're breathing. Most likely that man died of a heart attack or an overdose. Police are being crucified. And a high school wrestling coach in Spanaway, Washington State, his name is Dave Hollenbeck, he posted a photo of himself smiling and giving a thumbs up signal while another person had their knee on the back of his neck. And his caption was, "Not dead yet." He said, "I'm doing this for the area police officers. The media is a race baiting machine and I'm tired of it." Bethel School District is considering their thoughts about Coach Dave Hollenbeck. But what is particularly distressing or concerning, I think, frankly, is this the Boogaloo thing is these right-wingers, these white right-wingers who are following on Tim McVeigh's lead. And Tim McVeigh obviously didn't start this stuff. This goes back to the Klan. I mean, this goes all the way back, right? But this is the most modern version. This is Pepe the Frog reincarnated. And, their logos are things like Hawaiian shirts, right? And I'll just share some pieces of Jordan Green's piece, special to Raw's story. When protests against the police killing of George Floyd escalated into clashes between police and protesters Tuesday night, a significant segment of the Boogaloo movement was electrified. At 8:38 p.m., on this one particular message board for these guys, it's called the Citizens Liberty Organization, he said, "Send help," and put the address of 3000 Minnehaha Avenue, which is the 3rd precinct of the Minneapolis Police Department. And he said, police opened fire on protesters breaching precinct, not a drill. At 11:19, the Big Igloo Boys Facebook, BOIS, Facebook group posted a photo of a young man holding the trademark Boogaloo flag depicting an igloo and a palm tree in the protest. He said, if ever there was a time for boys, BOIS, to stand in solidarity with all free men and women in this country, it's now. In other words, us white, racist guys who want a race war in America, let's join with those black protesters and really, really whip things up, essentially, or at least that's my interpretation of it. Benjamin Ryan Teeter of Hempstead in southern North Carolina on his Facebook page posted at 11:44 last night, "Lock and load, boys. Boog flags are in the air and the national network is going off." He's also active in the North Carolina Libertarian Party and has been participating, in weekly armed excursions through downtown Raleigh. Facebook is filled with these white supremacist hate groups. It's just fine with Mark Zuckerberg, frankly. In fact, there's a piece, today's popular.info, Judd Legum's newsletter, points out that the 3 senior executives at Facebook who are responsible for basically a lot of this stuff are all Republican operatives, that Mark Zuckerberg is, very happy sucking up to the Republicans. Anyhow, this guy this is the Blue Igloo Facebook page. Boogaloo activists who showed up for the first night of protests on Tuesday met with mixed reaction. One, a white man identified on Facebook as Michael Solomon, posted photographs of himself and another friend holding high-powered rifles while posing alongside black protesters. Anti-fascist Twitter accounts on Wednesday issued a steady stream of warnings. These are the folks who are opposed to the right-wing fascists showing up. They say it's a right-wing thing, it's a neo-fascist thing, wrote Daryl Jenkins, a veteran anti-fascist organizer in New Jersey, on a Twitter video. He said, what they're trying to use, and they're trying to use what's happening in Minneapolis as a jump-off. Don't let them. They are not our friends. He told Raw's Story interviewed him. He said, they can be more aggressive, and they can cause the police to be more aggressive. The people they hate get hurt, and they walk away scot-free, so it's kind of a win-win for them. I've told you many times the story of when I was in SDS in 1968, and we learned a decade later, when we finally succeeded in suing the state police and getting their files, that the one guy, and actually there were several who were kind of with him and we never figured out who exactly they were, but this one real high-profile guy who was always showing up at our protests and was, eventually, I believe, I know several ROTC buildings were burned around the United States. I don't recall if the one at MSU specifically was. I believe it was, but I could well be wrong. This is an old memory. But I remember this guy. I can see his face right in front of me right now. And he was the one who was always saying, let's go burn down the ROTC building. Death to the pigs. I mean, this was his shtick, right? And we later learned he was a police informant. Well, this isn't police informants. This is just, right-wing guys who want to have a race war. Meanwhile, yesterday, Donald Trump retweets a tweet where the guy says the only good Democrat is a dead Democrat. Seriously, honest to God. At the same time that, Joe Biden is honoring 100,000 dead people, dead Americans, Donald Trump is retweeting this guy, Coy Griffin, who says the only Democrat is a good Democrat. And Trump says, thank you. See you in New Mexico. Right. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into the deaths in Florida. I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff in the news right now that is, I think, in my humble opinion, worthy of discussion. We'll be back in just a minute.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And we've got a whole bunch of great guests in the rest of the program. In our second hour, Professor Richard Wolff, the historic relationship between economic crises and political change, and two other guests in our third hour. And welcome back. Neil in Washington, D.C. Hey, Neil, what's on your mind today?
Tom, I'm a big fan. I'm a governor-level patron, so I'm a little disappointed that you're avoiding the big issue today.
Which is?
You're afraid of S.E. Robinson.
Oh, yeah, okay. Here, this is so funny. I mean, well, I'm not even going to go there. Martin in Huntington Beach, California. Hey, Martin, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hello, Tom. Yeah, when you start out your program this morning and talking about memorials, I think that Native Americans should be included along with that, with what's happening to them right now. And it would be good if they could somehow join up with African Americans and get something going, because they should all be together in this. And I also wanted to say what should
I think we should all be together in this as Americans, Martin.
Yeah, I know, but I agree with everything you say, but I would just think that what's happening, you're getting ravaged Native Americans right now, and it's making me sad. I'm really sad about that, and I think it should be brought up along with everything else. Also, I wanted to say what should be required reading for every Memorial Day is Slaughterhouse-Five.
Yeah, remind me about Slaughterhouse-Five. That was in high school. I don't remember the story.
Well, Kurt Vonnegut Jr., who I think was the greatest man of the 20th century, he was in Dresden, a meat locker in a slaughterhouse, and he wrote this book, and, it's kind of a science fiction gallows humor thing about Billy Pilgrim, how he got stuck in a time glitch and everything went backwards. All the planes went backwards, all the bombers went back into the planes, all the bullets went back into the guns, and all the resources went back into the earth, never to harm anyone again, and everyone turned into babies. Everything went, all the wars went in reverse.
Yeah, interesting.
He was a great man, and, he's the Mark Twain of the 20th century, and I think he's just a visionary.
Yeah. And it's amazing the literature that came out of that era, in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s in particular, because people were looking back on what happened in Germany in the 30s and 40s. And projecting, how could this happen in our society, and what's the antithesis of that? What is the thesis of that? Go ahead, Martin. I'm sorry.
It's like history's repeating itself again. I mean, what's he capable of? He hasn't got there yet, but how far will he go? Who might he gas if he wants to get rid of some evidence? It's just anything is possible. He's like one of the monsters of history. He's in the genocide club.
Yeah. So it seems. I want to say this too shall pass. My big concern is that Trump is not going to pass. That Trump has released a virus into the American body politic that's not going to be resolved any day soon. Anyhow, we'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Thanks for the call, Martin. We'll be back. It's 20 after. Stick around.
Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program.
It's that time of year where we celebrate Memorial Day. We memorialize the Americans who have died in our wars, in the Vietnam War, in the Iraq War, in the Afghanistan War, in the Gulf War, the earlier Iraq War, in the Korean War. If you add all of those wars together that I just named, the sum total of them is fewer than the number of people who have died in 3 months from COVID-19 virus on Donald Trump's watch. Isn't it time for us to memorialize the Americans who have died and are continuing to die at the rate of, well over 1,000 a day as a result of the incompetence of Donald Trump? It seems like maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's the time to add COVID-19 victims. Because, after all, Trump says we're warriors, or maybe there should be a separate holiday. But something to think about. You'll find a video about it over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Yeah, welcome back. So in addition to all this, and we'll continue this conversation, Donald Trump wants to go after social media now because they're pointing out his lies. And in fact, social media has done a lot of damage to America and the American body politic, with the most visible example being how social media helped put Donald Trump in the White House in 2016. But even more concerning should be Fox News and right-wing hate radio. A new study out of Columbia University finds that when people in any particular zip code experience a 1% increase in Fox News viewership, it, quote, and this is the study from Columbia, it, quote, reduces the propensity to stay at home by 8.9 percentage points compared to the pre-pandemic average. In other words, people are literally taking their lives in their hands because of the misinformation and lies that they're hearing on Fox News. One of the reasons so many people have died in America is because conservative media, we lead the world, right? 100,000 dead people. Is because conservative media has been repeatedly and consistently promoting the idea that this is some kind of Democratic hoax or a bad flu. Right-wing media has gone from being on the fringe of crackpots and paranoids to a major influence in American culture and politics. And at the same time, the billionaire owners of this media have been successfully avoiding any kind of responsibility or liability for the political chaos, the destruction, and now the deaths that they're helping cause, all while they're laughing all the way to the bank. Before the coronavirus, you could argue that right-wing media had just been disruptive to democracy and the public good. But now this new study from Columbia University shows it's actually responsible for death. In Rwanda, it was right-wing talk radio that incited and led that country's genocidal slaughter of its own people. In the 1930s in Germany, right-wing radio talk shows were used to identify Jews and trade unionists. They literally did it on the radio. Neighbors were encouraged to call in and denounce their neighbors so that angry mobs could attack them. Today in the United States, people who are heavy consumers of right-wing media have been threatening elected officials with guns, spitting what they claim is virus-laden saliva on workers in stores who are just trying to protect the public by enforcing mask rules or passing out masks. and gone out of their way to provoke police killings of people of color. A court in Seattle this week threw out an attempt to hold Fox News responsible for some of the deaths in Washington state that resulted in a commentator's came from commentators' irresponsible statements on Fox. And since Trump and McConnell have packed about a quarter of all the federal judges in this country with right-wing unqualified ideologues, it's unlikely the courts are going to help us out any. But the challenge America confronts today is how to reverse the damage that 3 decades of right-wing media have done to our country and to our people. So there's that. You don't have to be in Minneapolis to call into the show, by the way. There is something happening, and I just want to give you a little warning and a little heads up on what's going on. I noticed a few weeks ago that a right-wing guy who had been a guest on my show on RT back on TV years ago started tweeting at me, right? And all his friends were tweeting at me going, hey, you got to put this guy on the air. And nobody likes being stalked on Twitter, and I didn't know what was going on, and so I figured, okay, it's just some guy who's trying to leverage his career off my show. I mean, we've got the #1 progressive show in America, and we're on Sirius XM and everywhere else. And so I just started blocking them. And I blocked about 20 of his friends who were, saying, Hartmann, you're a coward, and Hartmann, why won't you, and this, that, and the other thing. The simple fact of the matter is I regularly debate conservatives on this program. I love having conservatives on this program. I welcome conservatives on this program. But, and I think I can speak for probably pretty much everybody, nobody likes being bullied into doing things. So, yesterday I got a note from somebody who's in this guy's circle saying that all kinds of his friends are going to be calling into your show today, mentioning his name on the air. So I'm just telling you in advance that this guy who had a podcast, and I heard this morning, and I haven't heard any verification of this, that he just got a show on Sirius XM. And if that's true, God bless him. That's great. I mean, I'm happy to put Sirius XM hosts on my program and cross-promote, or any of our stations. I do it all the time. But not that way. I mean, that's childish. It's juvenile. So, some of these calls are going to get through. Joyce was trying to filter out earlier people who had never called before. We're going to stop doing that. It doesn't really matter. And Essie, if you want to be on the show, reach out to my producer, Sean Taylor. That's how, if somebody wants to get booked on our show, you reach out to my producer. Her email address and her name are on my website. It's not a big deal. You don't have to do this thing like some, toddler who is throwing a tantrum and your buddies. It just makes you seem pathetic. So, anyhow, I just wanted to get that out and just give you a heads up that, there's this organized effort on the part of a guy who claims he's got a Sirius XM show to try to disrupt my show today, because he's trying to leverage some publicity for himself. And if that happens, feel free to ignore it. I'm going to. And that's all I'm going to say about it. We'll be
You're
back.
listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with your calls after this. It's our Free Speech TV
This is
fundraising time, an opportunity for you to show your support for Free Speech TV, to become a member of Free Speech TV. In fact, even better, to become a sustaining member, person who is making a contribution every single month. It's automatic. It's really easy. It's very simple and straightforward. You call up and say, hey, I'd like to give $10 a month, $20 a month, $50 a month, whatever it is that works for you, whatever you can afford, whatever's comfortable. And give me your credit card, and they will just ding your credit card every month. And when you want it to stop, just call them up and say stop. It's real simple. And this is the beginning of our pledge drive, our summer pledge drive here. And it's a really critical time. I mean, we've got so many people now who will not be contributing because they literally are out of work. They've lost their jobs. They're on layoff or on unemployment or whatever it may be. And if you're one of them, I am so sorry that this is happening, to so many of our fellow Americans. It's a tragedy. I mean, it's a real tragedy. The unemployment rate in Norway, in Germany, in France is in the neighborhood of 5-6%. Here in the United States, we're going to be pushing 25%. Because our policies are incompetent, our social safety net doesn't work, the Republicans have just screwed this country so badly over the last 40 years that we can't even respond to a pandemic, while other countries actually are doing just fine. So it's very, very unfortunate. There are some of us, however, who are, I'm on Social Security, and that covers my expenses, thank God, and knock on wood that it continues. So the Republicans are doing their best to try to destroy it, but for now, it's going forward. And if you are in a situation like me where you can, afford to live and get by and maybe even toss $10 a month to Free Speech TV or even a little more, then let me please encourage you to make a contribution now to Free Speech TV to help out this network, become more successful. The word is spreading. At the end of the program every day, I've been saying, be sure to tell friends about Free Speech TV. And what's so cool is that I'm getting calls, and most people who try to call in can't even get through, because we've got 8 lines and they fill up at the beginning of the show and they just stay slammed throughout the show. So, I don't hear that often from from a wide variety of people, but it seems like almost every day I'm getting somebody calling in and saying, oh, I just discovered you and I hadn't heard about you before, or my friend told me about you, or my neighbor, or I read about you on a message board. And, people are taking it to heart to spread the word. And that's really important because, if we lose half our donors because they can't, because they got wiped out, they don't have a job anymore, but we can double the number of people who are watching our show, we can continue this show and we can continue this network. So, number one, thank you for doing that. Those of you who have been, making a real kind of commitment to yourself every week to turn one other person onto Free Speech TV or awaken one or two other people every single week about, Free Speech TV and the benefits of it and the programming, and not just my show. I mean, there's some just extraordinary programming on Free Speech TV. Thank you for that. And thanks for expanding it. But if you can afford, please, now is the time. We really, really, truly need your help. And if you can contribute now, we've got some premiums. There's the Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. That's with a $20 gift. The I'm Voting Are You car magnet. That's with a $20 gift. The Just Effing Vote tote bag. That's with a $50 gift. The Free Speech TV webcam cover. That's with a $50 gift, a brand new gift. It's kind of cool. The Thom Hartmann Program mug, that's with a $75 gift. The Free Speech TV face masks, you get 2 of them for $100. I realize that's more than you'd pay for a face mask because most of that money is going to Free Speech TV, which is what you want, right? It's what we all want. So, and someday these will be collector's items. There's some of the memorabilia from the pandemic of 1918 is selling for really high prices over on eBay. Free Speech TV face masks, I have a feeling, no guarantees here, but I have a feeling these are going to be collectible. The social distancing kit, that's 2 Free Speech TV face masks plus Free Speech TV hand sanitizers. That's available for $120. The Just Effing Vote t-shirt is $120. The Hidden History of the War on Voting, my book, is $120. There's a virtual meet and greet where I get together with you on Zoom, you and a small number of other people. That is $240. And then there's the Thom Hartmann University box, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Just Effing Vote tote bag, I'm Voting Are You, the car magnet, the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. That's all $360. And after this all settles, after the dust settles, there's the in-person meet and greet post-COVID, and that's $1,000. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution and become part of the family, of the Free Speech TV family. On the Science Revolution this week, what can we learn from a 17% drop in greenhouse gas emissions during the coronavirus? The president of Mercy for Animals, Leah Garces, drops by about the millions of animals that will be culled by suffocation, drowning, and shooting. She's concerned about the inhumane way we're dealing with the closure of meat plants, and so am I. Author and Professor Seth Abramson is here about why Trump says he's taking dangerous drugs during the pandemic and how much money he might be making doing it. The Sierra Club's Ben Cushing is talking to me about the banks being under fire for fossil fuel financing. When will it end? Find the Science Revolution wherever you get great podcasts. Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Mike in Lomita, California. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. You're talking about people stoking insurrections. Remember also that in Rwanda, the big motivator seems to have been the use of hate radio to go out and murder.
Oh, it was. It absolutely was. And the guy who owned the station wasn't even in the country. In fact, I believe that the guy who owned the station that was promoting that just got arrested in the last couple of weeks.
Right, they found him in France.
They arrested him? Yeah, in France.
Yes, in Paris. Yeah, but anyway, there's a fellow called in yesterday advocating wearing Biden T-shirts. Well, I'll get to that someday maybe, but for the moment, I'm wearing my Trump death clock T-shirt, which, to describe it, is basically just a black sleeveless T-shirt, and it's imprinted in white with TrumpDeathClock.com, and has an upside-down American flag, symbol of distress, of course, and then it says today's AM total. And this from 6:15 Pacific Standard Time this morning is 60,544. So
now these aren't the total number of deaths. These are the total number of unnecessary deaths, people who wouldn't have died if Trump hadn't lied and BS'd us for 2.5 months.
Right, direct result of Trump's fantasy thinking and dithering and what have you. So I've won it. The number is on a piece of white tape, and which is augmented with safety pins at each end. So I'm just wearing it wherever I go out. Of course, there's a lack of opportunity to interact with people under this sort of COVID precautions. But the reaction so far has been interest and positive. I've been to 2 food stores, and one of the places I'm still getting takeout food from to try to keep them alive. Guy at the takeout food place looked at the shirt and he said, that Trump's a turkey. And at the food market, I've had interested readers and an affirmative nod or two. So that's going to be my project until we get deep into the campaign anyway.
It's the silent majority, Mike. Richard Nixon coined this phrase to suggest that he had, a majority of Americans who supported his policies. And it may have been true at the time. I frankly don't know. But I think that it's very clear right now that in America there is a relatively silent majority. They're mostly sheltering in place of people who are just disgusted and horrified by the Trump administration, these right-wing followers and whatnot of him, and it appears that your experience is reflecting that. Although I don't know Lomita, California, if it's a conservative or liberal community, you might have a very different experience if you lived in San Diego. Go ahead. Yeah,
it's sort of upper working class, basically, but a lot of people in unions around here. Yeah,
interesting. Okay, well, thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it, Mike. Dan in Kane, Pennsylvania. Hey, Dan, what's on your mind today?
Yes, sir. I'd just like to comment on the hatred that runs through this country. We don't teach in the schools the truth. We teach very little on slavery. We teach very little on women's suffrage. We have no labor history. You can just go right on down the line, and it's until that's done, I don't think any of this is ever going to change. I'll take your answer off the air. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Yeah, I brought this up yesterday. I was surprised isn't quite the right word, pleasantly pleased, whatever. Years ago, Louise and I have been married for a long, long time, but years and years ago, we got into a conversation about race, and the depth of her knowledge, which was way beyond mine, just shocked me. I mean, she knew the history of South Africa. She had read Cry the Beloved Country. She knew the history of race relations in the United States in ways that I didn't. She had read Malcolm X. She had read extensively the writings of Martin Luther King. She was very familiar with the Black Panthers. She had read either Huey Newton or Bobby Seale's book. And I'm like, whoa, how'd you know that? And a white person who had this level of insight, and she's like, we studied this at East Lansing High School, which, by the way, if it wasn't entirely white, it was damn close to it. I mean, it was where the kids of the people who worked at the university went to school, and by and large, I mean, that was the major industry in East Lansing. She learned this in high school, or junior high school, actually, because they had Black Studies classes, and they had them for several years in a row, that you had to take these Black Studies classes as part of what you were doing. And it completely changed her understanding of race in America. And I completely agree with your point that we need to be teaching this in school rather than this, Columbus discovered America when actually he was a rapist and a murderer and a slaver. And, we just need to be teaching civics. Robert in Grays Lake, Illinois. Hey, Robert, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I don't think I, would have to really get my persuasive skills up to make you realize, or maybe for you to agree that we are in, dangerous territory. And I think that actually what we're really seeing about is a second civil war. And I think that, I work on local politics with the local Democratic Party here, and I notice everybody's afraid to talk about that could be a possibility. Now, would it be as, ravaging as the first Civil War? I don't know. But nonetheless, I think that is a legitimate conversation for the left and Democrats to have. But I think what is even more important and what really undergirds our capacity to defend ourselves against what the white nationalists is a really honest and candid conversation about how the founders gave us the power within the Second Amendment to protect ourselves. And just as our freedom was established through a revolution, they understood that. They understood that politics can converge to a point of violence, and that's why they gave us the Second Amendment. And I am appalled that the Democratic
Well, actually, that's
Party,
not true, Robert. The Second Amendment was written to preserve the slave patrols in the South. But I'm not sure that necessarily blows up your argument. So continue.
No, because their moral basis for wanting the Second Amendment was to fight the northern aggression. I'm just saying it's flipped now.
Oh, I see.
And right now, the left is under pressure from, as you said, these white nationalists. When I was 16 and went to rallies against the war, the same kind of people you're talking about showed up. When I was 16 years old, I had a guy pull open his jacket and brandish, a sidearm, and I was like stunned. And I later found out the guy was a cop. So I'm just saying that I think the Democratic Party on the left has got to have an intelligent, honest, candid, understanding about what the Second Amendment is as a fundamental right of self-defense in this situation and where we're at. I mean,
you can leave it at that. But Robert, I don't want to go any farther down that road. Paul in Oakland, California. Hey, Paul, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Good morning. Hey, I've got a great idea for the COVID-19 museum and memorial. Trump is let's get some of our rich friends together. Like the Tom Steyers of the world, and buy one of Donald Trump's properties, which will be in distress in a couple of months, 5 or 6 months, and turn it in.
Oh no, he put a $135 billion bailout for real estate developers in the last deal, and apparently the Trump organization is starting to get hundreds of millions of dollars, or at least a lot of money. I don't know the specific amount, but the Trump organization apparently qualifies for this. So I don't think he's going to be in distress. But continue your story, Paul.
Okay, so let's buy one of his premier properties, the one in New York, the one in D.C., Mar-a-Lago, and turn it into a museum and memorial. And that way, 50 or 60 years from now, people can come and say, wow, all these people died unnecessarily just because Donald Trump was president. Yes.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's getting like no publicity or very little publicity is this movement that has been, I believe, Indivisible has been promoting it, where people bring body bags stuffed with, newspapers or whatever, but they look like there's a dead body in the body bags. And they're bringing them and they're laying them out in front of the offices they put a bunch of them in front of the Trump Hotel. They've been putting them in front of the White House. They've been putting them in front of the offices of Republican members of Congress who are supporting Trump and minimizing, the dangers that this virus represents to all of us, to our children, to young adults, right across the board. People are being intubated in their teens and 20s. We've had 12-year-olds die of this. That kind of guerrilla theater, that kind of political theater, I think really, really works, and there needs to be more of it. Buying a particular hotel may be more of a lift than most people could do, but getting body bags and Paul, I got to run, but thank you for the call. I get your point. I absolutely get your point, and I understand the sentiment, and I totally agree with it. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Boy, what a day. We'll be right back. Stick around. And welcome back. Let's see here. Beverly in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Beverly, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's up?
Good morning, Tom. I've been dying to tell you for months since you've been mentioning the blue skies in Portland. And I want to tell you, we got all the condensation or whatever it is up here in Tacoma and Seattle. And yeah.
Did they ever go away? Because Louise and I, on our walk yesterday, there were 3 jet trails, contrails in the sky, and that was the first time I'd seen more than one in weeks, in months. And it looks like air traffic is picking back up again.
We got it all up here. It was horrifying. I drove to the Seattle airport last night, and it was bad up there, and coming back south to Tacoma, it was really bad. The trails and crisscrossing trails, and they haven't.
So they never went away in Seattle.
No,
in Seattle, Tacoma.
And we have this military base. They might be up to no good. I just wanted to mention.
You never know. We get the jets here. The National Guard. You've got to do a certain number of touch and goes and a certain number of hours of flying every month or every year or every quarter. I don't know how the military does it. For pilots, it's annually. It's within 90 days that you have to have done 3 touch and goes to be legal, as I remember. Excuse me. I still have a pilot's license, but it's been a long time since I've flown. But the air pollution, it was beautiful for a while, but now it's backsliding. Beverly, thank you for the call. Corky in Rochester, New York. Hey, Corky, what's up?
Oh, Tom, you know how I like to extrapolate the ridiculous. I watched that video of that man on the ground, and there's a cop standing over him saying, "Get up, get up. You got your knee is on his neck."
Right. The cop is saying that for his body camera because he knows that his body camera shoots straight forward, and he's sitting up erect, or at least this is my opinion. He's sitting up erect, so his body camera is not showing the guy on the ground, but it is recording the audio. And that's why the cop is saying, well, why don't you get up in the car? And he's saying that for the benefit of the body camera. I don't think that cop realized he was being videoed. And, this is the thing. I mean, police killings of black men in the United States are epidemic and have been forever. And thank God we now have cell phone videos. And, for the last few years, we've been starting to see these things. And white people in this country are starting to realize, they're starting to have some empathy. They're starting to realize, what's really going on. Before that, it was always possible to do like, with Michael Brown. Oh, yeah, he was shoplifting, or he was a terrible person, or he was smoking pot yesterday, or, some other BS that that, in the minds of white racists justifies murdering black men. I really think things are changing. I think we are looking at a new day in America.
I'll tell you, my black doctor saved my life when I was a baby. And my kids were never allowed to use that derogatory language in my house or their friends or my...
Yeah. Well, good on you, Corky. I mean, step by step, whatever it takes. It's 10 minutes before the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Florida, it turns out, by the way, is hiding their medical deaths. We'll get to that, too, in just a minute, but we'll pick up your phone calls right after this. Stick around. Thom Hartmann here. Did you know that Chief Justice John Roberts, back when he worked for Ronald Reagan, came up with a way that Congress and the White House could get around the Supreme Court? Specifically, they were trying to blow up Roe v. Wade and Brown versus Board, but it could be used by Democrats right now. It's fascinating. It's in my new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, available wherever fine books are sold. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. David in Dallas, Texas. Hey, David, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Can you hear me okay?
Just fine, yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, first, I love your show. Thank you so much for what you do. I listen to it almost every day.
But
I guess I wanted to ask you a question. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you a question. I read an article in The Guardian by David Sirota the other day, and basically he was saying that the Democrats, not the Republicans, but the congressional Democrats, are doing things that are going to make Medicare for all impossible, probably for another generation. And I don't understand why. Well, I do understand why the Democrats are, not supporting it, because I think that most of them are on the payroll of, of Cigna and Aetna. But why are we standing for that? Why do you think the American people are not demanding Medicare for all more than we are?
The American people are, David. I mean, you look at the studies, over 60% of Republicans want Medicare for all, over 80% of Democrats do. People aren't out in the streets for it because it's like, there isn't an organized protest at the moment to join up
I
to.
know.
But the sad reality, David, is that prior to 1976, owning politicians was called corruption and bribery. And the U.S. Supreme Court in 1976, in a case called Buckley versus Vallejo, ruled that if a billionaire wants to own a politician, that's considered free speech, that money is the same thing as speech. From 1787 or 1789, when the Constitution was ratified, until 1976, owning a rich person, owning a politician was considered corruption and bribery. But that changed in 76, and then 2 years later, in another decision called First National Bank versus Bellotti, the Supreme Court ruled that logic applies to corporate persons as well as individual persons. So corporations can also own politicians. Then they doubled down on this with Citizens United in 2010, and then they doubled down on that with McCutcheon 3 years later, saying that not only that, there's literally no limit to the number of politicians that a billionaire or a giant corporation can own. So as a result, you've got the Progressive Caucus, which is, somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 Democrats in the House and Senate, most of them in the House, who are financing their campaigns through basically, local donations and small donations. But you've got the entire Republican Party and about half the Democratic Party, that the simple political reality is if they want to succeed in a campaign, if they want to be able to take out advertising on television or buy space in social media or whatever it may be in order to win a campaign, they've got to get their money from someplace other than, Grandma sending $20 or Junior sending $20. And the health insurance companies are more than happy to supply that. They spend millions, probably tens or hundreds of millions of dollars every year buying politicians. And not just at the federal level, at the state level as well. And David Sirota correctly points this out. Whether this is going to succeed in blocking Medicare for all for a generation, I'm skeptical of that. And I think we're going to see something like Medicare for all within the next 4, 5, 6 years. I could be wrong, and, I have a tendency to be optimistic about these things, but I'm also right, I think, frankly, more often than not. So, but that's the reality. And until we either, and I wrote an entire book basically about this. It's called The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. And it talks about Buckley, and it talks about First National Bank versus Bellotti. And it talks about how this all got started and how the Supreme Court got all this power. And it also talks about a strategy that John Roberts proposed to when he worked in the Reagan White House. He proposed to Ronald Reagan that, under Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution says that Congress can pass a law saying that there are some things that the Supreme Court may not rule on. So Congress literally could pass a law, according to the Constitution and according to John Roberts. Congress could pass a law saying that the Supreme Court may not rule on whether Medicare for all is constitutional or not. Or even better, the Supreme Court may not rule on whether or not our campaign limits are constitutional or not. And Congress just has not had the cojones to do that, or the courage to do that. And frankly, when Roberts presented that to the Reagan administration, specifically with the goal of blowing up Brown versus Board of Education, which had to do with desegregation, and Roe v. Wade, abortion, those were the two things that he was tasked with. How do we overturn these Supreme Court decisions without amending the Constitution? Because that takes forever and it's damn near impossible to do. And this is what he came up with. Have Congress pass a law saying abortion is illegal and the Supreme Court may not rule on this. Integration is or segregation is totally legal and the Supreme Court may not rule on it. And, when he presented this to the Reagan administration, they seriously considered it for the better part of a year. And then they ended up saying, the political blowback from this would probably be greater than the probability of success. It probably wouldn't succeed because we wouldn't have the support of the American people. The right of a woman to have an abortion and integration, racial integration, were actually at that point in the 1980s fairly popular things. So that's why they didn't do it. But frankly, I think that the Democrats should take a lesson from John Roberts. I think that they should read his memo, which I reprinted in large part in my book. And that there are ways, because until we can get money out of politics, until we can say to billionaires and companies like United Healthcare, no, you may not own politicians anymore, you may not contribute to politicians, we're going to continue to have a political system that's captive to big money interests. And by the way, it's not just healthcare and it's not just Medicare for all. It has to do with defense spending. It has to do with pharmaceutical prices. It has to do with banks ripping us off. It has, pick your evil, right, in today's society. All of them. It has to do with pollution. It has to do with Trump's deregulating, the ability of coal and fossil fuel companies to pour poisons into our water and air. Every single one of those things, the only reason the will of the people want environmental regulations. Trump has just blown up almost 100 of them. The only reason is because he's being paid to.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
It's our Free Speech TV fundraising time, an opportunity for you to show your support for Free Speech TV, to become a member of Free Speech TV. In fact, even better, to become a sustaining member, person who is making a contribution every single month. It's automatic. It's really easy. It's very simple and straightforward. You call up and say, hey, I'd like to give $10 a month, $20 a month, $50 a month, whatever it is that works for you, whatever you can afford, whatever's comfortable. And give me your credit card, and they will just ding your credit card every month. And when you want it to stop, just call them up and say stop. It's real simple. And this is the beginning of our pledge drive, our summer pledge drive here. And it's a really critical time. I mean, we've got so many people now who will not be contributing because they literally are out of work. They've lost their jobs. They're on layoff or on unemployment or whatever it may be. And, if you're one of them, I am so sorry that this is happening, to so many of our fellow Americans. It's a tragedy. I mean, it's a real tragedy. The unemployment rate in Norway, in Germany, in France is in the neighborhood of 5-6%. Here in the United States, we're going to be pushing 25% because our policies are incompetent, our social safety net doesn't work, the Republicans have just screwed this country so badly over the last 40 years that we can't even respond to a pandemic, while other countries actually are doing just fine. So it's very, very unfortunate. There are some of us, however, who are, I'm on Social Security, and that covers my expenses, thank God, and knock on wood that it continues. So the Republicans are doing their best to try to destroy it. But for now, it's going forward. And if you are in a situation like me where you can, afford to live and get by and maybe even toss $10 a month to Free Speech TV or even a little more, then let me please encourage you to make a contribution now to Free Speech TV to help out this network, to help this network, become more successful. The word is spreading. At the end of the program every day, I've been saying, be sure to tell friends about Free Speech TV. And what's so cool is that I'm getting calls, and most people who try to call in can't even get through, because we've got 8 lines and they fill up at the beginning of the show and they just stay slammed throughout the show. So, I don't hear that often from from a wide variety of people, but it seems like almost every day I'm getting somebody calling in saying, oh, I just discovered you and I hadn't heard about you before, or my friend told me about you, or my neighbor, or I read about you on a message board. And, people are taking it to heart to spread the word. And that's really important because, if we lose half our donors because they can't, because they got wiped out, they don't have a job anymore, but we can double the number of people who are watching our show, we can continue this show and we can continue this network. So, number one, thank you for doing that. Those of you who have been, making a real kind of commitment to yourself every week to turn one other person onto Free Speech TV or awaken one or two other people every single week about, Free Speech TV and the benefits of it and the programming, and not just my show. I mean, there's some just extraordinary programming on Free Speech TV. Thank you for that. And thanks for expanding it. But if you can afford, please, now is the time. We really, really, truly need your help. And if you can contribute now, we've got some premiums. There's the Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. That's with a $20 gift. The I'm Voting Are You car magnet. That's with a $20 gift. The Just Effing Vote tote bag. That's with a $50 gift. The Free Speech TV webcam cover. That's with a $50 gift, a brand new gift. It's kind of cool. The Thom Hartmann Program mug. That's with a $75 gift. The Free Speech TV face masks. You get 2 of them for $100. I realize that's more than you'd pay for a face mask because most of that money is going to Free Speech TV, which is what you want, right? It's what we all want. So, and someday these will be collector's items. There's some of the memorabilia from the pandemic of 1918 is selling for really high prices over on eBay. Free Speech TV face masks. I have a feeling, no guarantees here, but I have a feeling these are going to be collectible. The social distancing kit, that's 2 Free Speech TV face masks plus Free Speech TV hand sanitizers. That's available for $120. The Just Effing Vote t-shirt is $120. The Hidden History of the War on Voting, my book, is $120. There's a virtual meet and greet where I get together with you on Zoom, you and a small number of other people. That is $240. And then there's the Thom Hartmann University box, which is 2 free speech TV face masks, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Just Effing Vote tote bag, I'm Voting Are You, the car magnet, the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. That's all $360. And after this all settles, after the dust settles, there's the in-person meet and greet post-COVID, and that's $1,000. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution and become part of the family, of the Free Speech TV family. So we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who support our program, and there's a really troubling concatenation of events, events, that are happening in the United States right now. We created these concentration camps for refugees seeking asylum. This was Stephen Miller's big project. And we've got concentration camps for children, concentration camps for male adults, concentration camps for female adults. And now we've got this virus sweeping through the United States, and people are starting to die in these concentration camps, which has provoked ICE or whoever's running them to deport hundreds of the children back to the countries that they came from without their parents, which is mind-boggling, and in many cases carrying disease. This is serious stuff, and we need to be talking about it. The new video is over at thomhartmann.com.
Imperialist country.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Professor Richard Wolff is on the line with us, the economist, co-founder of democracyatwork.info, his other website, rdwolf with 2fs.com. You can tweet him at Prof. Wolff with 2fs. And Professor Wolff, welcome back. It's so glad to have you with us. I'm wondering, what is the historic relationship between economic crises and political change? Was there an economic piece to the Russian Revolution, or the French Revolution, the rise of Hitler, the Civil War, World War I and II? I know the American Revolution was preceded in 1770 by a major economic crash that caused the British Parliament to give a huge tax break to the British East India Company. That was the Tax Act of 1773 that provoked the Boston Tea Party. What about the rest of these? And how predictable is that association? And how often do we ignore it when we look at history?
Well, I think the problem is that while it is true that economic crises typically are followed by political upheaval, it's not always the case. Maybe the way to put it is political upheaval is frequently previewed, if you like, by an economic crash. But if the economic crash happens at a time that isn't contextually ready for it, then it can rise and fall. I mean, the way to say it is, for example, the great crash of 1929, and what we're living through now is the closest we have to that. The great crash of 1929, global in its scope, completely transformed, for example, Germany from a relatively progressive liberal state to modern Nazism. So you couldn't have a more dramatic. And likewise, the same crash in the same period of time produced a dramatic shift to the left, the opposite direction, here in the United States, when the Republicans gave way to a middle-of-the-road Democrat, Roosevelt, and he, in turn, responded to pressure from below and became probably the most progressive president in American history. So you can see that the crisis has different consequences depending on the environment, the context, and the economic crisis can or cannot provoke serious political adjustments. It is, however, true, and there's lots of examples, that it is hard to imagine
a very severe economic downturn having no political consequence, that would be a hard one to find. We really are easier historically in seeing that anything approaching the kind of severity we're now going through, passing without political turmoil, that's extremely unlikely. So if what you're wondering, Tom, is are we in for a political rough ride, I think the answer is virtually certain.
It seems to me, Professor Wolff, that the Republican Party and the conservatives, or perhaps more correctly, the billionaires who are behind the conservative movement, or at least so-called conservative movement, much like, in the 1930s, the billionaires who were behind Hitler. I just last year finished reading Fritz Tyson's book, I Funded Hitler. I Paid Hitler was the title of the book.
Right.
And it was just an amazing story about how over about a 1.5 year long period, he was financing the rise of Hitler, thinking that Hitler was going to be the best thing that ever happened to German industry. I mean, he was a steel baron, right? And, and it wasn't until the mid-30s, I think 36, 37, thereabouts, that Tyson realized really deep down in his guts what a horrible thing he had done and had to basically flee. And it seems to me, and I'd love to get your take on this, and please correct me if you think I'm wrong or argue with me, that our generation of Fritz Tysons, the right-wing billionaires, the Mercers and the Kochs and the Adelsons and whatnot, who funded the rise of Donald Trump and the modern Republican Party, have not read that book, have not got that memo, but they have learned from that lesson of what happened in the United States in 1932 versus what happened in Germany in 1932. And so rather, because in 32, as Hoover was, and the whole Republican machine, and it was substantial, as you know, was going down in flames. It wasn't just Hoover who was discredited, so was Coolidge and Harding, although Coolidge was, gone by then. That they're not letting the Republicans be discredited outside of just Donald Trump. In fact, they're trying to portray Donald Trump as sort of an anomaly. And they're building this conservative infrastructure, much like Tyson did in 1932 in Germany, to pave the way for a more, quote, business-friendly future, which I interpret as fascism. And they're not going to make the mistake that the conservatives of the 1920s did here in the United States. They're trying to play out the game plan of the conservatives in Germany in the early 1930s, or am I just have I gone way too paranoid and off the edge here?
No. I think that your rendering of the history is really basically quite correct. I think there is a key difference in Germany. Unlike here in the United States, the business community, Thyssen, Krupp, all the other huge backers, they initially didn't want Hitler. They initially wanted the conservatives to replace the left-of-center socialists, but the problem was history didn't wait for them. The socialists and then the Communist Party, which rose very fast in the 1920s, they zoomed into enormous power in the aftermath of the Great Crash. That's one of the lessons we ought to learn. From being strong, they became very strong, as millions of unemployed people had enough of capitalism and turned towards socialism, much as young people are polling in the United States today. So suddenly, the ruling groups, the big industrialists in Germany, were frightened. They were frightened that not only would they not get their conservative the way they hoped for, but they would be swamped by a working class split roughly between socialist and communist parties, and together wiping them out in terms of the capitalist dominance. In that panic, and this is all taking place in 1931 and 32, there's an election in which over half the people in Germany vote for either the socialist or communist parties, so that they are clearly on the rise. And in that moment, they turn to Hitler. They had made fun of him before, but he was the only one who had some sort of mass base. that the conservative business community could turn to. Nobody else was available, so they went with him, and he quickly kind of turned the tables on them, leading people like Thyssen eventually to break away. We don't have that here. We don't have a strong left. Ironically, it is the right wing in America since the Great Depression, since the New Deal, that has done so much to wipe out the left. And here is the irony of the history. It was the left in the 1930s that got us Social Security, unemployment compensation, the first minimum wage, federal jobs program for millions. And that created the so-called middle class, a class that got higher wages than they could have gotten any other way with a strong union movement. This thing that the right wing is trying to destroy, it set up the American capitalism whose growth in the last 70 years after World War II, after the Great Depression is over, has been faster and more successful than ever before. The right wing is now destroying what might do it again, and therein lies the double irony that they're also self-destructive.
Yeah, they're literally killing the goose that laid the golden egg.
That's right.
Professor Richard Wolff, democracyatwork.info, his most recent book, Understanding Socialism. Dr. Wolff, thank you for dropping by.
Thank you, Tom. Take care.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls and how Florida is hiding their deaths. Oh, gee, they've got a really slick little scheme here. I'll tell you about it in a bit. And welcome back. Kenyatta in Los Angeles. Hey, Kenyatta, what's up? Kenyatta? Hello? Oh, I think we're on hold. Let's try Joe in Detroit. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Can you hear me?
Just fine, thank you.
Tom, how's it going? I've been a senator listener of yours for a long time now. I actually love the program. But first, I want to talk about, I think it's absolutely disgusting that you won't debate SE.
Yeah, right. This is, again, as I said, conservatives are welcome on this program. Book it through my executive producer. Linda in Hillsdale, Michigan. Hey, Linda, what's up?
Hi. My question is, what is the best way to donate? I'm getting all these things in the mail, like, it's Ditch Mitch, or would I be better off just sending money right to, Amy's campaign, or do I do the DCCC? I just,
right. Somebody asked Mark Pocan this question on Wednesday, Linda, and I agree with his suggestion, which is, if you have individual candidates that you like, you care about, you want to see them elected, the most effective way to support them is to send money directly to their campaign, up to the limit that you can do, or to super PACs that support their campaign if they are a candidate that has super PACs. When you give money to the DCCC or the DSC, whatever it is, Democratic Senatorial Campaign, DSCC, I guess, or the Democratic Party for that matter, you're not only, some of that money will get to the candidate or candidates, but a lot of that money is also going to end up paying for the bureaucracy of those organizations. So,
sure.
if you've got a candidate there that you like, support the candidate directly.
All right, perfect. And just so you know, Hillsdale, Michigan is still terribly Trump supporters. So
yeah,
it's terrible.
Yeah. Well, they're all over the country, and go ahead. Yeah. We just had, we're gonna have to figure out a way to live together here. Linda, thank you for the call. Scott in Portland. Hey, Scott, what's up? Scott? No, Scott. Boy, there's an epidemic of this today. Let's try Ziggy in Atlanta. Hey, Ziggy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to talk to you about Donald Trump Jr.'s book, Triggered. Are you familiar with that?
I haven't read the book, but I've seen the cover.
Yeah, you don't need to read it. It's boring. But it's, it was ghostwritten by somebody, actually.
No, I didn't know that. I'm not surprised. But.
Yeah, no, it was supposed to have a different title. It was supposed to be called "Don't Be Scared of Me" by S.E. Robinson.
Yeah, right. Yeah. See, this is another one. I'm telling you guys, this is not the way to do it. Anyway, Jules in St. Louis, Missouri. Hey, Jules, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I finally got hold of you, Tom. Look, it's been bothering me for a while. When I first read the Second Amendment, and I kept hearing all these people say they're going to kill the government and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Jules, I'm sorry. I was trying to put you on hold. I hit the wrong button. We'll be right back. Give me a call back right now. There's one line open. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes, or coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. Stick around.
Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. So we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who support our program, and there's a really troubling concatenation of events events that are happening in the United States right now. We created these concentration camps for refugees seeking asylum. This was Stephen Miller's big project. And we've got concentration camps for children, concentration camps for male adults, concentration camps for female adults. And now we've got this virus sweeping through the United States, and people are starting to die in these concentration camps, which has provoked ICE or whoever's running them to deport hundreds of the children back to the countries that they came from without their parents, which is mind-boggling, and in many cases carrying disease. This is serious stuff, and we need to be talking about it. The new video is over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, some of the stuff in the news today, and there's some fascinating and consequential things in the news. This is Mark Sumner writing over the Daily Kos, just exposing what Ron DeSantis is up to in Florida. It turns out that Florida has had a sudden spike in deaths from pneumonia. From 2014 to 2018, the numbers that we have numbers for, the average number of pneumonia deaths per year for an entire year in Florida was around 2,800. So every year in 2014, in 2015, in 2016, in 2017, in 2018, each year on average for the entire 12-month period, there were around 2,800 people who died of pneumonia in Florida, which is, sounds about right? It's not unusual. But we are 5 months into this year, and so far there have been 4,200 pneumonia deaths in Florida. Now, why are there almost twice as many pneumonia deaths in Florida right now? Because there's not as many COVID deaths. Florida apparently is reclassifying COVID-19 deaths as pneumonia deaths so that they can say, we've only had a couple thousand people die, 2,300 recorded deaths, 56,000 cases. But Michigan has in the neighborhood of 56,000 cases too, but they have twice as many deaths as Florida does. So what we're seeing here is that Ron DeSantis is lying to the people of Florida and to the American people, and apparently he's not the only one. Apparently this is happening in a number of red states. Apparently even the CDC numbers have been corrupted by these antibody tests that the FDA allowed to be sold that don't work. And millions of them got sold. Everybody wanted to get one right away. And there was, something like 70 or 80 different manufacturers who were selling antibody tests. And it turns out that they would say, yes, you have the antibodies if you had had the common cold in the last year, because that's also a coronavirus. It's a different family of coronaviruses. It's the A category instead of the B category, but, nonetheless. So Trump says, we've got millions and millions of tests. Well, not so much, number one.
Number two, you've got state after state after state where the governors and the companies in those states, the companies, the large workplaces, where they're having these outbreaks, particularly meatpacking plants, prisons, and facilities where people are just jammed in together. They're refusing to release these statistics. But when we look at the death rate, it's one of the harder things to hide. Although, as I just pointed out, in Florida, Ron DeSantis is actually hiding them in Florida. He's hidden apparently several thousand COVID deaths just in the last couple of months. Keep in mind, people have only been dying of COVID since March. It's May. I mean, and he's apparently hidden as many COVID deaths in Florida, or nearly as many as there were all the pneumonia deaths the previous year. But if you look at the death rate changes, Arkansas right now is up 142% in deaths from deaths. In Oklahoma, they're up 50%. In Iowa, they're up 44%. In Virginia, they're up 29%. In North Dakota, 28%. In Georgia, 20%. Minnesota, 12%. And Alabama, 10%. Everybody else is, single digits. And some states are actually reducing their death counts. Here in Oregon, I think it's been several days since we've had anybody die. And, we just found, and we're going to learn today from the state where it is, but there's one workplace, apparently in the Portland area, where there has been an outbreak. And that will not translate into deaths for another couple of weeks, 3, 4, 5 weeks. But there's been an outbreak here in Portland. Prior to that, we were seeing Multnomah County, which is Portland, basically. It's the biggest county in the state, population-wise. We were watching, the death rates or the infection rates. And the infection rates, a month and a half ago, it was like 30 people a day, and then it was in the 20s, and then it was in the teens, and then the last couple of days it was like 2, 3, 5, but it's going to pop back up again. And in fact, there's a fascinating piece in the Washington Post about how it appears that one of the principal ways that this virus spreads isn't so much person to person, but super spreader to group. You get one person who is really blowing a lot of viruses out for some reason, and we're not sure of the reason. It may be that there's somebody who talks loudly. It may be that there's somebody who has a lot of saliva. I mean, we just don't know. We're still trying to figure this out. But that one person will infect 20, 30 people in a workplace or wherever it may be, in a church. I mean, the major outbreaks have been in churches and meatpacking plants and really tightly confined working places that are, similar to meatpacking plants in terms of people being together. And if you can just get those under control, then the principal vehicle for getting them under control, and this is what Japan has done. Japan never locked down. Their constitution doesn't allow it. They used to have a fascist administration. They want to make sure they never had another one. So Japan never locked down. Instead, what they did was basically encouraged everybody to wear a mask all the time. They don't shake hands, they bow. And so everybody's wearing a mask, nobody's shaking hands, and people are talking softly. That's literally part of their plan. And they have the lowest death rate of any of the G7 nations, several of which shut down. So masks, big deal. They really help. It's 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls right after this. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls in just a moment. It's our Free Speech TV fundraising time, an opportunity for you to show your support for Free Speech TV, to become a member of Free Speech TV. In fact, even better, to become a sustaining member, person who is making a contribution every single month. It's automatic. It's really easy. It's very simple and straightforward. You call up and say, hey, I'd like to give $10 a month, $20 a month, $50 a month, whatever it is that works for you, whatever you can afford, whatever's comfortable. And give me your credit card, and they will just ding your credit card every month. And when you want it to stop, just call them up and say stop. It's real simple. And this is the beginning of our pledge drive, our summer pledge drive here. And it's a really critical time. I mean, we've got so many people now who will not be contributing because they literally are out of work. They've lost their jobs. They're on layoff or on unemployment or whatever it may be. And, if you're one of them, I am so sorry that this is happening, to so many of our fellow Americans. It's a tragedy. I mean, it's a real tragedy. The unemployment rate in Norway, in Germany, in France is in the neighborhood of 5-6%. Here in the United States, we're going to be pushing 25% because our policies are incompetent, our social safety net doesn't work, the Republicans have just screwed this country so badly over the last 40 years that we can't even respond to a pandemic, while other countries actually are doing just fine. So it's very, very unfortunate. There are some of us, however, who are, I'm on Social Security and that covers my expenses, thank God, and knock on wood that it continues. So the Republicans are doing their best to try to destroy it. But for now, it's going forward. And if you are in a situation like me where you can, afford to live and get by and maybe even toss $10 a month to Free Speech TV or even a little more, then let me please encourage you to make a contribution now to Free Speech TV to help out this network, become more successful. The word is spreading. At the end of the program every day, I've been saying, be sure to tell friends about Free Speech TV. And what's so cool is that I'm getting calls, and most people who try to call in can't even get through, because we've got 8 lines and they fill up at the beginning of the show and they just stay slammed throughout the show. So, I don't hear that often from from a wide variety of people, but it seems like almost every day I'm getting somebody calling in and saying, oh, I just discovered you and I hadn't heard about you before, or my friend told me about you, or my neighbor, or I read about you on a message board. And, people are taking it to heart to spread the word. And that's really important because, if we lose half our donors because they can't, because they got wiped out, they don't have a job anymore, but we can double the number of people who are watching our show, we can continue this show and we can continue this network. So, number one, thank you for doing that. Those of you who have been, making a real kind of commitment to yourself every week to turn one other person onto Free Speech TV or awaken one or two other people every single week about, Free Speech TV and the benefits of it and the programming, and not just my show. I mean, there's some just extraordinary programming on Free Speech TV. Thank you for that. And thanks for expanding it. But if you can afford, please, now is the time. We really, really, truly need your help. And if you can contribute now, we've got some premiums. There's the Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. That's with a $20 gift. The I'm Voting Are You car magnet. That's with a $20 gift. The Just Effing Vote tote bag. That's with a $50 gift. The Free Speech TV webcam cover. That's with a $50 gift, a brand new gift. It's kind of cool. The Thom Hartmann Program mug. That's with a $75 gift. The Free Speech TV face masks. You get 2 of them for $100. I realize that's more than you'd pay for a face mask because most of that money is going to Free Speech TV, which is what you want, right? It's what we all want. So, and someday these will be collector's items. There's some of the memorabilia from the pandemic of 1918 is selling for really high prices over on eBay. Free Speech TV face masks. I have a feeling, no guarantees here, but I have a feeling these are going to be collectible. The social distancing kit, that's 2 Free Speech TV face masks plus Free Speech TV hand sanitizers. That's available for $120. The Just Effing Vote t-shirt is $120. The Hidden History of the War on Voting, my book, is $120. There's a virtual meet and greet where I get together with you on Zoom, you and a small number of other people. That is $240. And then there's the Thom Hartmann University box, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Just Effing Vote tote bag, I'm Voting Are You, the car magnet, the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. That's all $360. And after this all settles, after the dust settles, there's the in-person meet and greet post-COVID. And and that's $1,000. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution and become part of the family, of the Free Speech TV family. So we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who support our program, and there's a really troubling concatenation of events, events, that are happening in the United States right now. We created these concentration camps for refugees seeking asylum. This was Stephen Miller's big project. And we've got concentration camps for children, concentration camps for male adults, concentration camps for female adults. And now we've got this virus sweeping through the United States, and people are starting to die in these concentration camps, which has provoked ICE or whoever's running them to deport hundreds of the children back to the countries that they came from without their parents, which is mind-boggling, and in many cases carrying disease. This is serious stuff, and we need to be talking about it. The new video is over at thomhartmann.com. For the people who are... this one's about national health insurance and why and how we really need a single-payer national health care system, whether you call it Medicare for all, or you call it single-payer, or you call it whatever. Medicare for all, it has a lot of appeal because generally speaking, Medicare is positively viewed. That's what they call it in Canada. It's called Medicare. And, which makes sense, care for people using medicine. We would save at least $150 billion a year just on billing. You've got hospitals in the United States that have entire floors devoted to billing. Hospitals in Canada have one desk with, one or two people sitting at that desk, handling the billing. It's just crazy. And people would get better care, they get more comprehensive care, our entire nation gets healthier, and there's a whole bunch of essentially bullet points to build this argument for Medicare for all over at thomhartmann.com. You can check it out right now. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Adam in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Hey, Adam, what's on your mind?
Oh, wow. Okay. Shalom, Tom. It's like you said, it's Adam in Jersey. I'm conservative, and I am curious to get your take on something that I read in a recent Robinson report, the fact that the liberal media and liberals in general. Yeah. Okay. Another attempt. I'm not going to even respond. It's really sad. In fact, hang on just a second, Claudia. Let me just say this again. There is a right-wing guy who's had this little podcast, and he was the producer of some show. And I believe I learned yesterday that he's got a new show on Sirius XM. Sirius XM producers have called me in the past and said, hey, we're doing so-and-so. Would you have our guy on? Can we talk about this? Can we cross-promote shows? I'm more than happy to do that. I really am. And I love debating conservatives. I've been doing it for years. But when people stalk me on Twitter, and when they try to crash my show by constantly getting on and trying to say this guy's name, when if you're in radio, we've got a 9-second delay, an obscenity button. We push the button, it vanishes. But even if it doesn't, it's like when that happens, it doesn't make a host inclined to say, oh yeah, let's get this guy on and debate him. We tried to book Julio Rivera today. We book Julio regularly. He's a conservative. He's a friend. But he went to the dentist and he can't talk right now. But it's like, give it up, guys. It's all you're doing is hurting your own cause. You're making yourself and the host that you think you're promoting seem like some sort of pathetic wannabe. So anyhow, I'll just leave it at that. I'm sure more will get through. It's no big deal. Life in the big city, etc. Luann in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Luann, what's on your mind?
Hello. I wanted to talk about the police. I think part of the problem, they're always talking about training, and training is very important. But I think that the problem goes back further. I've worked in the criminal justice system for years, and my father was a policeman, and my husband was a correctional officer, and so I'm very familiar with it. And I think the basic problem, is the hiring. that they don't have good criteria for hiring. I have seen so many police that just could not think well enough for the job and the responsibility that they have. There's somehow they're making some kind of terrible mistake in their recruitment. And I think one of the things that needs to be done is that they need to be paid a much higher salary to attract people who are just more intelligent and more educated. Well, you don't have to be educated to be a good policeman, but that have more knowledge of the world. And if you have better pay, then you can recruit better individuals. And people don't want to risk their lives for paltry pay, but they need, the basic thing is they need to change their criteria, because I have run into so many police that were really disappointing. Now, there's some good police too, but you just wonder why they're choosing these people.
Yeah. Luann, I used to think that too. And then I went through the Georgia Police Academy, and I think it was 1998, the year that the Olympics came to Atlanta. I was writing a novel about a private detective, and a friend of mine was a private detective, DeWitt Wanamaker, and he got me, the Georgia Police Academy, for the first time in its 130-year history, opened itself to civilians to get training. It was kind of a mini course. It was like a little 6-week course, shorter than the regular How to Become a Police Officer course, for people who were going to do security for the Olympics in Atlanta, because they didn't have enough cops. And so I went through this course, and about 3/4 of the people who were there, we were just plugged into the normal training program. So 3/4, 4/5 of the people who were there were guys who were trying to get certification to become a police officer in a small town in Georgia, basically, or in some cases big cities. But some of the big cities have their own police academies. I'm not sure about Georgia, but in any case. And what I got from that, and what I got from the year that we lived in Germany. And I had a couple of interactions with the police. It turns out it's illegal to leave your car unlocked in Germany, and twice I got busted for that. And it was that it's not so much the pay. There's cops in the United States who are making over $100,000 a year when you include overtime, in particular, in some of the big cities. The pay can be very good. The benefits package can be very, very good. The pension, the retirement is all very good. There are some police departments that require a bachelor's degree to get in. They tend to be better police departments. But I think the big problem is that policing in the United States is done in a way that is similar to that of authoritarian governments around the world, and not the way that policing is done in the more advanced democracies, the way that policing is done in Taiwan or South Korea or Germany or France or Denmark or Norway, where the police are respected and the police respect the citizens. And this is reflected in our culture. It's reflected in our television programs. It's reflected right now in our president telling cops to rough up people who have not been convicted of a crime. And a lot of this goes back to slavery, frankly. It goes back to, having an underclass, a marginalized underclass that was easily identified by their appearance, that were terrorized. We had a police state in this country for 200 years, literally a police state. It's the only way you can maintain slavery. So I think that the change that needs to happen is not just hiring better cops or hiring better people, more thoughtful people. And it's not just paying them better or having higher educational standards. We need to rethink policing. We need to re-understand. We need to understand differently what policing is. That old idealized Andy of Mayberry. That is good policing. And that still exists in many parts of America, even in some big cities, but at least to some extent. But the problem is that because of the culture of policing in the United States, and this is what I saw, when DeWitt and I were going through the police academy, we were having lunch one day, and there was a bunch of cops who were drilling. They were marching up and down in the atrium. There's a giant atrium in the Georgia Police Academy where the dining room is there, and then there's this big area where they drill, because it's police or paramilitary, and it's covered, in case of rain and things. And I said to DeWitt, how much do these guys make when they graduate? And he's like, I don't know, $25,000, $30,000 a year, whatever he said. Keep in mind, this was almost 30 years ago. And I said, wow, you couldn't get somebody to shoot at me for that amount of money. And he said, are you kidding? He said, a third of those guys, if you give them a club and the right to beat the crap out of anybody they want, they do it for free. And that was my experience. There was about a third of the guys who were in my class who were, really good guys. They were, not Dudley Do-Rights, but, Andy Mayberry types, people who really wanted to be, and most of them were from small towns, actually, in Georgia. And many of them were people of color. About a third of the guys in my class were there because they wanted a good pension and a good, safe, reliable job. Keep in mind, the top 10 most dangerous jobs in America do not include policing. Number one is roofers. More roofers die on the job than anything else. Garbage men die on the job more frequently than cops do. So it's not, so they were just looking for a good, safe job, with a good pension. And the remaining third were those people that DeWitt identified as the guys who, if they had the legal, under color of law, they could beat the crap out of people, or in the case of this guy in Minneapolis, murder people. They jumped at the opportunity. And that's where we need to change, Luann. We need to change the culture, our entire culture, because policing is a reflection of our entire culture, and our entire culture is still stuck in the era of the slave patrols. It's still stuck in the area of an overclass and an underclass. It's still stuck in the area of us and them, or me and them. And we need to have an us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And that's one of the reasons that I thought it was such a monumental thing when the mayor of Minneapolis came out and said, I can't figure out why these guys are not in jail. And welcome back, Terry in Ventura, California. Hey, Terry, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Great to get through. Tom, this is sort of a follow-up question to a woman who called earlier about who should we donate to and what's the most effective way to donate directly to a candidate. Remember that call? My question, hey, I got that stimulus check from Donnie freeing up a few dollars. And my thought, unfortunately, I view the American political system as so centered around TV attack ads, okay, I'm ashamed to say, but I think that's about half the war we have in electing a president. That's worth a discussion right there. But my question, as I asked earlier, what do you think is the most effective? If you had some free dollars to donate, which PAC would you give to for TV attack ads? I think the Republican one is the most effective. That is downright scary. Have you seen that with the
the Lincoln Project?
Wow, that is scary.
Yeah, Republicans know how to do ads. they know how to do negative advertising, and they're going after Trump, with both barrels blazing. Maybe that's a terrible metaphor,
but you get my point. Do I give my money to a Republican organization because they're the most effective? Okay.
I would be reluctant to do that on the assumption that once you've got President Biden, they will turn their fire on him.
That's what I've been thinking.
Right. Yeah. My inclination would be to, there's this old phrase, all politics is local. Tip O'Neill famously said that, although I'm sure he wasn't the first. And I would look for local politicians, statewide politicians, races where even a $25 contribution may actually have an impact. Right. Somebody running for city council. I mean, this is when you talk to members. I mean, Congressman Pocan talks about this on this program. When you talk to members of Congress, you talk to people in the Senate. And Bernie Sanders started out as the mayor of Burlington. Right. So, if you look at, and I believe Mark Pocan started out on the city council, I could be wrong, but he started out somewhere, small and local. That's the feeding ground. That's the beginning point. And then, kind of the cream rises from there. You get really good people who do a good job in those venues and, promote them or they promote themselves through their natural political talents and end up, wherever they end up. Bill Clinton went from small town Georgia to governor of Arkansas, to governor of Arkansas to president of the United States. His wife to senator. So I would always focus my efforts locally. It's one of the reasons when we have a member of Congress who his district is right next door to where I live. It's not, I don't live in his district, but it's right next door. Kurt Schrader. He's a conservative Democrat.
That won't get Donnie defeated, right? Which is paramount concern this time around. He's a horrible person.
Yeah. If your entire focus is getting Donald Trump defeated, then
American Progress, that was Hillary's ad agency. I thought who really did awesome ads was Bloomberg. Okay, he knew how to fight the war, So I don't know who to give my money to. Hey, Tom.
Well, if you want to get Donald Trump defeated, then the person you want to be giving money to is Joe Biden.
Gotcha.
I mean, that's, it's just like, going back to the notion of always support the candidate. It would be Joe Biden. But I'm telling you, the Democratic Party needs a farm team. They need strong people from the local level up. So, maybe both. Terry, thank you for the call. It's a thoughtful call and conversation. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Thom Hartmann here. Did you know that the Second Amendment was written to protect the slave patrols in South Carolina and Georgia back in the day? It's in my new book, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment, available wherever you find great books. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Nancy in Elkhart, Indiana. Hey, Nancy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I when you talked about Louise in school, I never thought I'd be one of the old folks, but I'm so glad I still think like I did when I was in college. We in Michigan at that time, I went to Western, and what we had to do in elementary was we had to take Black Studies to teach elementary. Now that was a long time ago. But it was so necessary because that was the time there were the race riots, and we were, and as we could see them, and our professors said it's going to be up to you, quote, young folks, because we have to change things, because just like you've said on your program, it takes something always violent to change our country. And it does take a long time, I guess. And I'd like your opinion. Just, how that phrase is, who you are is where you were when. That's kind of what I think happened. And again, because us old folks now, we're the ones who were growing up when Johnson had passed when they were doing the things, was the Equal Rights Amendment? I guess that was it.
Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, Civil Rights. Yeah. And we grew up and we knew about all that. But I'd like you to kind of talk about that with who was making laws. Yeah.
It kind of goes back to that riff that I did a little bit ago about policing, it's not just the problem is not a problem of our police. The problem is a problem of our larger culture, that we are still stuck in this slave patrol culture, and in fact, we still have, Confederate traitors whose statues are in the Capitol building, for God's sake. It's.
Well, we never went. I'm sorry. Well, I was never in school with any black kids in my age, but when I grew, when I became a teacher, we had black students with us, and remember the busing, because of busing, everybody just went haywire. But it did change. It did change some things, but look how slowly it did. But it's still we're still so racist. And when I talk to younger people that are now adults, my 50-year-old children, they don't understand it, and they don't understand how our culture is still so racist, and nothing is going to get good. Right. Even the virus until our country believes that we are wrong.
Well, the millennial generation is the most awakened to these issues of any generation in my lifetime.
I hope so.
And certainly, my parents' generation of white people were completely oblivious to this stuff. And we were just starting to be exposed to it, with like Louise's Black Studies class in what was probably 1963 or 64. And and I think we're all going through an educational process as a country now. And, frankly, I think that that's a good thing, but, step by step. Nancy, thank you for the call. I got to move along. Mark in Dana Point, California. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Tom. The consciousness of our culture has changed. I mean, the police cars used to all say protect and serve. They don't say that anymore. The congressmen are supposed to be our representatives. Now they think they're our leaders. It's tyrannical. It's changed. And that's all I really wanted to say.
No, and you've identified these, very, very real problems. Thank you, Mark. Absolutely. Let's see here. Pam in Chicago. Hey, Pam, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Tom, I just wanted to talk about COVID-19. And and if I may mention something about race, but I'll go here first. Tom,
we just have about a minute and a half, Pam, FYI.
Okay, I'll be quick. Trump botched this entire COVID, and he's responsible for not the pandemic, but for death. And I don't know if we can course correct with the reopening. So I'm asking everybody to be careful, Tom, because for me, is no safe reopening. That's just kind of propaganda. You do the best you can, but we still will be putting ourselves at risk, as well as our children and loved ones, when we try to reopen. As it relates to, I'm sorry, Tom.
I said I agree. I would add, though, Pam, if we all wore masks like they do in Japan, and if we did contact tracing and isolation of people who are infectious and don't realize it, which is apparently about 40% of all the people who are carrying this virus, then we could so radically cut this transmission that we could end up like Australia with no new cases. New Zealand, they literally don't even have a person in the hospital. Taiwan, South Korea. South Korea has fewer than 300 dead people. Taiwan has fewer than 20. We could do that, but we don't have the leadership for it. Back to you.
Right, because that's a big if. And Tom, I'm intrigued with you and Louise. I don't know if you have a biography, but just with your relationship and how you all made decisions together. But then also as it relates to race, I would just encourage Tom, read some of the Black scholars, and I'm talking about for your audience. Read some of the beautiful writings and well-researched writings of some of our Black scholars, and I think that will help as well. Because bottom line is, it's not about it's not how you treat the Black person you know. It's about how you think and treat the Black people that you don't know.
Sure.
And
who would be at the top of your reading list, Pam?
Oh gosh, Tom. I love John Henry Clark. Lerone Bennett, Dr. Lerone Bennett, Before the Mayflower, Forced into Glory. Dr. Ben, Yochanan, Dr. Asa Hilliard. I mean, just so many Black scholars. Dr. Sheikh Anta. I mean, just so many. Dr. Sheikh Anta. Excuse me.
Okay, I'm making notes. Pam,
yes,
Pam, I got to run. Thank you.
Out.
Thanks. Thank you for your continuing commitment to my education. I appreciate it. And it's always nice to hear from you, Pam. We'll be right back. It's hitting the top of the hour. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
It's our Free Speech TV fundraising time, an opportunity for you to show your support for Free Speech TV, to become a member of Free Speech TV. In fact, even better, to become a sustaining member, person who is making a contribution every single month. It's automatic. It's really easy. It's very simple and straightforward. You call up and say, hey, I'd like to give $10 a month, $20 a month, $50 a month, whatever it is that works for you, whatever you can afford, whatever's comfortable. And give me your credit card, and they will just ding your credit card every month. And when you want it to stop, just call them up and say stop. It's real simple. And this is the beginning of our pledge drive, our summer pledge drive here. And it's a really critical time. I mean, we've got so many people now who will not be contributing because they literally are out of work. They've lost their jobs. They're on layoff or on unemployment or whatever it may be. And, if you're one of them, I am so sorry that this is happening, to so many of our fellow Americans. It's a tragedy. I mean, it's a real tragedy. The unemployment rate in Norway, in Germany, in France is in the neighborhood of 5-6%. Here in the United States, we're going to be pushing 25% because our policies are incompetent, our social safety net doesn't work, the Republicans have just screwed this country so badly over the last 40 years that we can't even respond to a pandemic, while other countries actually are doing just fine. So it's very, very unfortunate. There are some of us, however, who are, I'm on Social Security, and that covers my expenses, thank God, and knock on wood that it continues. So the Republicans are doing their best to try to destroy it. But for now, it's going forward. And if you are in a situation like me where you can, afford to live and get by and maybe even toss $10 a month to Free Speech TV or even a little more, then let me please encourage you to make a contribution now to Free Speech TV to help out this network. To help this network, become more successful. The word is spreading. At the end of the program every day, I've been saying, be sure to tell friends about Free Speech TV. And what's so cool is that I'm getting calls, and most people who try to call in can't even get through, because we've got 8 lines and they fill up at the beginning of the show and they just stay slammed throughout the show. So. I don't hear that often from from a wide variety of people, but it seems like almost every day I'm getting somebody calling in saying, oh, I just discovered you and I hadn't heard about you before, or my friend told me about you, or my neighbor, or I read about you on a message board. And, people are taking it to heart to spread the word. And that's really important because, if we lose half our donors because they can't, because they got wiped out, they don't have a job anymore, but we can double the number of people who are watching our show, we can continue this show and we can continue this network. So, number one, thank you for doing that. Those of you who have been, making a real kind of commitment to yourself every week to turn one other person onto Free Speech TV or awaken one or two other people every single week about, Free Speech TV and the benefits of it and the programming, and not just my show. I mean, there's some just extraordinary programming on Free Speech TV. Thank you for that. And thanks for expanding it. But if you can afford, please, now is the time. We really, really, truly need your help. And if you can contribute now, we've got some premiums. There's the Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. That's with a $20 gift. The I'm Voting Are You car magnet. That's with a $20 gift. The Just Effing Vote tote bag. That's with a $50 gift. The Free Speech TV webcam cover. That's with a $50 gift, a brand new gift. It's kind of cool. The Thom Hartmann Program mug. That's with a $75 gift. The Free Speech TV face masks. You get 2 of them for $100. I realize that's more than you'd pay for a face mask because most of that money is going to Free Speech TV, which is what you want, right? It's what we all want. So, and someday these will be collector's items. There's some of the memorabilia from the pandemic of 1918 is selling for really high prices over on eBay. Free Speech TV face masks. I have a feeling, no guarantees here, but I have a feeling these are going to be collectible. The social distancing kit, that's 2 Free Speech TV face masks plus Free Speech TV hand sanitizers. That's available for $120. The Just Effing Vote t-shirt is $120. The Hidden History of the War on Voting, my book, is $120. There's a virtual meet and greet where I get together with you on Zoom, you and a small number of other people. That is $240. And then there's the Thom Hartmann University box, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Just Effing Vote tote bag, I'm Voting Are You, the car magnet, the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. That's all $360. And after this all settles, after the dust settles, there's the in-person meet and greet post-COVID, and that's $1,000. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution and become part of the family, of the Free Speech TV family. So we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who support our program, and there's a really troubling concatenation of events, events, that are happening in the United States right now. We created these concentration camps for refugees seeking asylum. This was Stephen Miller's big project. And we've got concentration camps for children, concentration camps for male adults, concentration camps for female adults. And now we've got this virus sweeping through the United States, and people are starting to die in these concentration camps, which has provoked ICE or whoever's running them to deport hundreds of the children back to the countries that they came from without their parents, which is mind-boggling, and in many cases carrying disease. This is serious stuff, and we need to be talking about it. The new video is over at thomhartmann.com.
Wegman.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. 6 minutes past the hour. Back in the day, some, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, something like that. I wrote an op-ed, which I just retweeted. It was on Truth Out, about a genetically modified organism that almost got into the wild. And were it not for a university professor in Washington State by the name of Elaine Ingham, or actually one of her students, it may well have done some serious damage. There's a bacteria that is on the roots of every plant basically in the world. It's called Klebsiella planticola. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It helps plants convert nutrients in the soil or in the water into plant material. And they thought, and somebody came up with a brilliant idea of, hey, this bacteria is everywhere. Let's create a genetically modified version of it that will convert cellulose, because this bacteria was capable of digesting cellulose, that will convert cellulose into alcohol, and then we can take all this waste cellulose, like the wheat stalks and things, just throw them in giant bins, toss in some genetically modified Klebsiella, and it'll produce gasoline, it'll produce ethanol, and everything will be wonderful. And they were about to test this out in public, in a public field in Washington State. And this student, for part of his master's thesis or his PhD thesis, decided to look into this. And what they discovered was that the genetically modified version that would convert, plant matter into alcohol was capable of living in the wild, was capable of reproducing in the wild, and had it spread across the planet, it would have killed every plant on Earth, or at least a large chunk of them, by making them drunk, by feeding them with alcohol instead of water. It was a big deal back in the late 90s. It led to a lot of concern about genetically modified organisms. Now, this is not quite that drastic, but we're looking at superweeds. I mean, there's all kinds of issues around GMOs right now. And Bill Freese is with us. He's the science policy analyst with the Center for Food Safety. centerforfoodsafety.org is the website. And Bill, I understand that the Trump administration is trying to further loosen regulations on GMOs, on genetically modified organisms. Tell us about this. And by the way, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom. No, it's really interesting. The Trump USDA just released final regulations for this kind of overhaul of the GMO regulatory system. It was first instituted back in the 80s, and it hasn't had a major change since then. And without going into too much detail, there was initially around 2004, there was some, initial moves towards strengthening the regulations because USDA had gained additional authority. But there were several false starts that never happened. And so now here we are in 2020, 16 years later, with something that's completely opposite of what was originally intended, right? Which is, as you said, much weaker rather than stronger regulations.
So what could be the consequences of this, Bill?
Well, from our perspective, it's 2020 now, and we've had GMOs for like 25 years commercially. And we're seeing problems that weren't so evident in the beginning when these crops were first introduced. And the main thing is, you mentioned superweeds. Well, those superweeds are weeds that are resistant to, glyphosate herbicide, better known as Roundup, but also other herbicides too. So they're really, really hard to control. And they've only really come on in a big way since the GMO era, because almost all GMOs are herbicide resistant, right? And so that they allow farmers to spray herbicides very freely without worrying about damaging the crop, all right? So what we've seen is a big increase in herbicide use. That's more selection pressure on weeds to evolve resistance to these herbicides. And it's become one of the major problems in agriculture now, these, super weeds. And some of the additional... I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well, some of the additional authority that USDA gained has to do with addressing noxious weed issues related to GMOs, right? Noxious is just a fancy word for bad or terrible, right? And sure enough, we have these weeds, and we need, either prohibitions or at the very least restrictions on these herbicide-resistant GMOs in order to address this problem. But USDA doesn't want to address the problem. And
my understanding
I think the reason is pretty clear.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's not just that the proliferation of, or the widespread use of things like glyphosate, herbicides, plant killers, are producing an evolutionary pressure to that favors the plants that are resistant to that particular herbicide, but that in the lab, in the process of developing Roundup-resistant soybeans, Roundup-resistant corn, whatever it may be. I guess it's BT corn, the Bacillus thermophilus is the thing in the corn, but whatever. In the process of doing this, they're actually doing this by inserting that resistance into the genome of the GMO food plant, and that portion of that gene is capable of jumping into weeds in the wild. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, there are two ways that this herbicide resistance can create problems, right? And you described them both perfectly. One way is if it's a plant that cross-pollinates widely and it has relatives in the wild, which some crops do, then you can have just the problem that you talked about with the herbicide resistance gene going from the crop to a relative, a weedy relative, right? And that can create resistance. But, most of our problems haven't been from that because like corn and soybeans, the major crops that are herbicide resistant, they don't really have these weedy relatives. And it really has been from this herbicide selection pressure. And that doesn't make it less of a problem, Right. And the thing to keep in mind is that, like with glyphosate, there were hardly any glyphosate-resistant weeds before these Roundup Ready crops were introduced as these Roundup Ready GMOs that are resistant to the herbicide. That was in the mid-90s, hardly any at all, and now they're on about 120 million acres of cropland. And it's because the glyphosate-resistant weeds, right, which have become so epidemic, they create problems for farmers. And so what does the, seed pesticide industry come up with as a false solution? it's newer crops that have resistance to different herbicides, right? And so they sell that to farmers as, oh, you have glyphosate-resistant weeds. Well, now you can spray dicamba or 2,4-D or some other herbicide because we've made the crops resistant to those as well.
Right. Bill,
So
we
it's
just have a
really
minute
this
left
kind
until
of
we're going to hit a hard
spiral.
break here. I'm wondering what the average person, somebody who's listening or watching this program right now can do about this.
Yeah, well, it's like we, Center for Food Safety, we do a lot of work on this, policy issues, and we're trying as hard as we can on one issue is to get meaningful labeling of GMOs. And that would give people the opportunity to say, hey, I don't want to buy these foods. And there is a federal law passed, but it hasn't been. It's not very good. We're trying to, work through the system to try to get it to be a little more meaningful.
So that's the consumer applying market pressure. What about political pressure?
Yeah, our organization, we have action alerts. You can check out our website, and we're always getting folks, opportunities to email or call their, legislators or regulators to get change. Too.
Great. It's Center for FOR, Center for Foodsafety.org. Bill Freese is the senior science policy analyst. Excuse me. Bill, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Yep, great talking with you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls. I'm going to tell you why Trump really hates vote by mail right after this. And welcome back, Scott in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Scott, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, we'll try this again. Hey, about a year ago, you had an author on to talk about a book. It's Edward J. Watts, and his book was Mortal Republic, about the Roman Empire. And
yeah, I just reread that about 6 months ago, or reread a good chunk of it.
I picked it up and got through most of it. And as tomes about the Roman Empire go, it's pretty damn readable. But the point that he was making on your show, and then that has really stuck in my brain, was he said where the whole thing started pulling off the rails, where it really started getting bad, was when politics became violent based on political differences. In other words, if someone, you voted for impeachment, so we're going to vote you out. Well, no, how about you voted for impeachment, so we're going to show up at your house with tiki torches and set it on fire. And we are damn close to that right now, and it worries me.
Yeah, and that was Octavia, wasn't
it? Yeah, I believe that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was the last Roman emperor. He wasn't the last emperor, but that was the end of the Roman Republic, basically. And
and it just it was coming from the top down. Dumpties, pushing everybody's buttons and encouraging it, and we know the tapes, so we don't need to go over them now.
Yeah, I mean he retweeted a guy today saying the only good Democrat is a dead Democrat.
Exactly, and that's really worrisome. If you want to believe in history and the repetition thereof.
Yeah, it's extremely troublesome. Scott, thank you. Excellent points all. Dennis in Shorewood, Illinois. Hey, Dennis, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I've got some thoughts about the situation with the police officers, and I wonder about what you think about my thoughts. If initially they give psychological testing among the recruits, just an initial psychological testing to weed out guys that right off the bat they know aren't going to work. Then during the training program, if they had a battery of psychological tests, I mean an expensive test, where they put some money into it, because it'd be better money up front than $10 million settlements, on the back end because a police officer did something he shouldn't have. And then maybe periodic testing every 5 years. Why? Because of what they have to deal with day in and day out. And, the psychological effect that has upon them. And then if somebody's having a problem, they work with the union and put them under a remediation plan, but have a certain level of confidentiality with that so that you don't get additional resistance from the union. I mean, I was a union president for 17 years, and you can work with the union or we can be at loggerheads. You know, it all depends on who's willing to do what, you know. So I was just wondering your thoughts.
Dennis,
on
why
something
not
like that.
why not redefine the job? Why not get cops out of their cars and into neighborhoods? Why not go back to neighborhood policing?
Oh, yeah, I'm all for that, too. I just think we got to make sure we get the right people in there. Just sort of like wherever there's children, it draws pedophiles, you know. So it has a tendency to draw people who want to use authority into the police department, and you got to make sure those people don't get in, or if some people are starting to have a problem, you have a mechanism to, you know, resolve it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Dennis, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program.
Hey, we have a new video over at thomhartmann.com for people who are supporters of our program. On this one, I'm digging into, or actually kind of taking issue with, a new article that's over on thenation.com titled, "Could Coronavirus End Globalization?" And they've got a bunch of analysts who are weighing in on this sort of thing. And my take is that this is going to be even bigger than that. This depression that we are sliding into is being softened right now by the Federal Reserve throwing $6 trillion at America's largest corporations. 1/3 of all economic activity for a year in the United States. Twice the annual federal budget. The Fed has just parked $6 trillion with a couple of hundred big companies. And it's just masking what's coming. It's going to get bad, and it could become fascist. And so check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com, for the people who support our program. Thank you. So Donald Trump is on a tear about voting by mail, right? Oh, voting by mail is terrible. It's filled with fraud. You can't do it. It turns out that his press secretary in the last 11 elections voted by mail 10 times. It turns out that Donald Trump just voted by mail in the Florida primary. That may be illegal, by the way, because Mar-a-Lago is not a legal residence, and he's claiming it as a legal residence, even though it's a business. But that's a whole other story. But vote by mail, he's on a tear against vote by mail. And strangely enough, it's up over the irony or the hypocrisy of all this is up over at the top of Democratic Underground right now. Somebody from Pennsylvania who's getting emails, for Republicans in Pennsylvania on May 26th got one that said, this is from Donald Trump. Pennsylvania primary is right around the corner, and now you can vote from home for President Trump. This is the first time that every registered voter in Pennsylvania can avoid the lines by requesting a ballot. Request your ballot and cast your vote from your own home. So that's the email they sent out to Republicans in Pennsylvania. Here's the email, and again, you can see this at democraticunderground.com. Here's the email that the Trump campaign sent out to their supporters nationwide one day later. Quote, "We need to make one thing clear. There's no way that universal mail-in ballots will be anything less than substantially fraudulent. Mailboxes will be robbed, ballots will be illegally printed out and forged, and the election will be rigged." Well, there is it's a lie. There's no evidence of that, ever, of any consequence at all. But the real reason that Trump hates voting by mail is because he knows that the only reason he's in the White House is because of voter suppression. And there's a couple of different forms of it. I remember in the 2004 election, people were particularly amazed by this. In Ohio, people were waiting in line 10, 12, 14 hours to vote, literally all day long and well into the evening to vote, because exclusively in black neighborhoods. Well, that's a form of voter suppression. You close a bunch of polling places, so you funnel everybody into one or a very small number of voting places, and then you put the broken machines in those places. The same thing happened in Georgia. It was well documented. I wrote an op-ed about it. You can read it over at commondreams.org right now. And, laying this out, complete with links to the old news stories from 2004 in Ohio, 2018 in Georgia, et cetera, where, this form of voter suppression, making it, forcing people to wait in line 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, or longer, is particularly difficult for people who are paid by the hour, because you're taking money out of their pocket. I mean, frankly, I think you could argue that it's a poll tax. So that form of voter suppression, which is a very effective form of voter suppression, what they found was when they closed a bunch of the polling places, and the data, all of that data is in my article. In fact, maybe I can just give it to you if I can easily find it here. In Georgia, they closed a bunch of polling places. Here we go. And what it did was it cut black voter participation by 7%, which was enough to throw the election to Brian Kemp. And back in 2016, it was enough to throw it, well, not in Georgia to Donald Trump, but in other states. So that's number one. The second form of voter suppression that the Republicans love to do, and it really is at the center, and this, my book, The Hidden History of Voting, The War on Voting, really digs into this in depth, is the provisional ballot. In 2002, George W. Bush and the Republicans passed this law called the Help America Vote Act that not only gave $5.5 billion to the states to buy voting machines from two companies run by partisan Republicans, but also created a whole brand new kind of ballot called the provisional ballot. And provisional ballots only get counted when the Secretary of State says, okay, let's count them. So, for example, in Ohio, when John Kerry threw in the towel in 2004, there were more provisional ballots that had not been counted, mostly from black neighborhoods, than the margin of victory of George W. Bush. John Edwards came on this program yelling about it. He was very upset that Kerry had thrown in the towel. He wanted to have a lawsuit. But Ken Blackwell, the Secretary of State of Ohio at that time in 2004, said, we're not going to count those provisional ballots unless there's a lawsuit. So what happens is if you get purged from the voting list because your name is the same as the name of somebody in Texas or Florida or a felon from Texas, if you get purged from the voting list, you show up to vote. You didn't know you've been purged. You show up to vote. They give you a provisional ballot. They say, here, you vote on this one. It goes in a different box, but it looks identical to the regular ballots. You vote. You think you voted. You walk out. You say to the person, as you're walking out, yeah, I just voted. I just voted for Hillary Clinton. But your vote actually never gets counted. And you have no way of knowing that. Well, with mail-in balloting, there are no provisional ballots. You either get a ballot in the mail or you don't. And they come out, 6-8 weeks in advance. So if you don't get a ballot and the election's coming up, all you have to do is call the Secretary of State and say, I think I got wrongly purged from the voting rolls. Please put me back on and mail me a ballot. So that whole provisional ballot, and this is what causes the red shift, that form of voter intimidation doesn't work, or voter suppression doesn't work. And then finally, the way that William Rehnquist made his chops in the Republican Party back in the 60s was standing in line challenging Black, Hispanic, and Native American voters, asserting that they didn't have a right to vote and scaring them away. And again, you can't do that with vote by mail. So of course Trump hates vote by mail. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And that is, of course, why he just said it right out loud, with mail-in balloting, you won't ever see a Republican elected again, right? It's our Free Speech TV fundraising time, an opportunity for you to show your support for Free Speech TV, to become a member of Free Speech TV. In fact, even better, to become a sustaining member, person who is making a contribution every single month. It's automatic. It's really easy. It's very simple and straightforward. You call up and say, hey, I'd like to give $10 a month, $20 a month, $50 a month, whatever it is that works for you, whatever you can afford, whatever's comfortable. And give me your credit card, and they will just ding your credit card every month. And when you want it to stop, just call them up and say stop. It's real simple. And this is the beginning of our pledge drive, our summer pledge drive here. And it's a really critical time. I mean, we've got so many people now who will not be contributing because they literally are out of work. They've lost their jobs. They're on layoff or on unemployment or whatever it may be. And, you know, if you're one of them, I am so sorry that this is happening, you know, to so many of our fellow Americans. It's a tragedy. I mean, it's a real tragedy. The unemployment rate in Norway, in Germany, in France is in the neighborhood of 5-6%. Here in the United States, we're going to be pushing 25% because our policies are incompetent, our social safety net doesn't work, the Republicans have just screwed this country so badly over the last 40 years that we can't even respond to a pandemic, while other countries actually are doing just fine. So it's very, very unfortunate. There are some of us, however, who are, you know, I'm on Social Security and that covers my expenses, you know, thank God. And knock on wood that it continues. So the Republicans are doing their best to try to destroy it. But for now, you know, it's going forward. And if you are in a situation like me where you can, you know, afford to live and get by and maybe even toss $10 a month to Free Speech TV or even a little more, then let me please encourage you to make a contribution now to Free Speech TV to help out this network, you know, become more successful. The word is spreading. You know, at the end of the program every day, I've been saying, be sure to tell friends about Free Speech TV. And what's so cool is that I'm getting calls, and most people who try to call in can't even get through, you know, because we've got 8 lines and they fill up at the beginning of the show and they just stay slammed throughout the show. So, you know, I don't hear that often from from a wide variety of people, but it seems like almost every day I'm getting somebody calling in saying, oh, I just discovered you and I hadn't heard about you before, or my friend told me about you, or my neighbor, or I read about you on a message board. And, you know, people are taking it to heart to spread the word. And that's really important because, you know, if we lose half our donors because they can't, you know, because they got wiped out, they don't have a job anymore, but we can double the number of people who are watching our show, we can continue this show and we can continue this network. So, number one, thank you for doing that. Those of you who have been, you know, making a real kind of commitment to yourself every week to turn one other person onto Free Speech TV or awaken one or two other people every single week about, you know, Free Speech TV and you know, the benefits of it and the programming, and not just my show. I mean, there's some just extraordinary programming on Free Speech TV. Thank you for that. And thanks for expanding it. But if you can afford, please, now is the time. We really, really, truly need your help. And if you can contribute now, we've got some premiums. There's the Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. That's with a $20 gift. The I'm Voting Are You car magnet. That's with a $20 gift. The Just Effing Vote tote bag. That's with a $50 gift. The Free Speech TV webcam cover. That's with a $50 gift, a brand new gift. That's kind of cool. The Thom Hartmann Program mug. That's with a $75 gift. The Free Speech TV face masks. You get 2 of them for $100. I realize that's more than you'd pay for a face mask because most of that money is going to Free Speech TV, which is what you want, right? It's what we all want. So, and someday these will be collector's items. You know, there's some of the memorabilia from the pandemic of 1918 is selling for really high prices over on eBay. Free Speech TV face masks, I have a feeling, no guarantees here, but I have a feeling these are going to be collectible. The social distancing kit, that's 2 Free Speech TV face masks plus Free Speech TV hand sanitizers. That's available for $120. The Just Effing Vote t-shirt is $120. The Hidden History of the War on Voting, my book, is $120. There's a virtual meet and greet where I get together with you on Zoom, you and a small number of other people. That is $240. And then there's the Thom Hartmann University box, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks, the Hidden History of the War on Voting, Just Effing Vote tote bag, I'm Voting Are You, the car magnet, the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. That's all $360. And after this all settles, after the dust settles, there's the in-person meet and greet post-COVID and that's $1,000. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution and become part of the On the Science Revolution this week, what can we learn from a 17% drop in greenhouse gas emissions during the coronavirus? The president of Mercy for Animals, Leah Garces, drops by about the millions of animals that will be culled by suffocation, drowning, and shooting. She's concerned about the inhumane way we're dealing with the closure of meat plants, and so am I. Author and Professor Seth Abramson is here about why Trump says he's taking dangerous drugs during the pandemic and how much money he might be making doing it. The Sierra Club's Ben Cushing is talking to me about the banks being under fire for fossil fuel financing. When will it end? Find the Science Revolution wherever you get great podcasts. So it turns out the spy agencies in the United States were notifying the Trump administration that something's going on in China. Looks like another SARS outbreak. Maybe we should get ready for this. It was ignored. I've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for the supporters of our program that basically goes through the whole timeline, all the way from, actually going back to 2018 when Trump disbanded 3 different anti-pandemic agencies in the Department of Homeland Security, the National Security Council, and the executive branch. Just closed them down, fired the people. That was the end of that. How he ignored the intelligence in November, he ignored the intelligence in December, he ignored the epidemic now coming into the United States in January, he ignored it in February, just going the blow-by-blow timeline. And I think it's really worth having it all in one place, a good recap, a good summary of this that you can refer to and you can share with your friends. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. You can check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is our old buddy Paul Gunter with Beyond Nuclear. He is the director of the Reactor Oversight Project at Beyond Nuclear, beyondnuclear.org, of course, the website, and Beyond Nuclear, the Twitter handle. And Paul, welcome back to the program. I understand that you have been writing about and documenting a lack of preparedness at our nuclear plants around the country. Not so much in the context of, the kinds of disasters we've discussed before, floods and things like that, but of this virus of COVID-19. Do I have that right?
Hey, Tom. Yes, that's exactly spot on. The concern is that here we are in the Washington, D.C. area, and we're all on a lockdown where the populations are essentially sheltering in place, and the concern is that the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission is, on the one hand, they are relaxing requirements, licensing obligations for the nuclear power plant operators, so that they can run these plants least cost under the guise of protecting workers from exposure to COVID. This is the same time a number of these plants have got up to 1,800 new workers coming in to refuel. So on the one hand, the NRC is supporting the production agenda for U.S. nuclear power industry by allowing these crews, which are coming in from all over the country to the United States, to proceed in these crowded conditions for refueling. And at the same time, they're relaxing requirements for work hour control to keep fatigue down. Now operators can go for 12-hour shifts up to 2 weeks straight. And that's a relaxation from the requirements in the operating license. And at the same time, they're ignoring the fact
that if there were an accident at a nuclear power station, that evacuation is no longer really a viable option. We're here. We would need to evacuate. Clearly, that would be the preferable option, but going into a pandemic situation really doesn't. It's an impossible choice. You're safe neither here nor there. So we just had
it's like what we saw with these people in Midland, Michigan, where you had that horrible flooding, and all of a sudden they're having to, they've lost their homes, and so they're hanging out in high school gymnasiums and things, and meanwhile the virus is circulating like crazy. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks down the road, you're going to start seeing deaths as a result of that. Are you suggesting that the practices that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is allowing are going to lead to the spread of this virus inside these nuclear power plants? And have we seen any evidence of that so far?
Well, the folks around Midland, Michigan, they were put in a situation there where the floodwaters were rising rapidly. I need to note that Midland, Michigan is also the home of a Dow Chemical research reactor, which we saw went on a notification that they were expecting flood conditions on site at the Dow Chemical Triga reactor. Now, this is not a commercial power reactor. It's a much smaller reactor, but there's lots of high-level nuclear waste on that site. And while as the floodwaters were coming in, that didn't trigger a full-fledged alert at the Triga reactor, but the flood did. And, a lot of people chose not to go into those high school gymnasiums, but they slept in their cars. Now, that's not an option in the event of a nuclear accident. We're very concerned with this situation.
So, do we have, it sounds like the alarm that you're raising, Paul, entirely appropriately, is here's a precarious situation that could get bad really fast. Do we have any evidence yet that it has anywhere?
There have been no actions that have prompted any kind of alert or at a commercial nuclear power station. But like I said, Tom, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission is relaxing safety standards around nuclear power stations. They're working operators, security guards, fire brigades at these power stations in overtime. Remember that the 3 Mile Island accident on March 28, 1979 was the combination of mechanical failure and operator error caused by fatigue. And that's exactly the kind of perfect storm that we're setting up right now by, populations that are sheltering in place around most communities around these nuclear power stations and relaxing operating license conditions. This includes inspections, repairs that are scheduled under the operating license for safety-related equipment like steam generator tubes, where they're supposed to be inspecting these things 100% on a calendar date. The calendar date on a number of these reactors has fallen during the COVID pandemic. And so these inspections have now been postponed until the next refueling outage, 18 months away, which means this equipment is not getting inspected. It's not getting repaired if need be. And, on February 15th, 1999, we had just such an event at the Indian Point Unit 2 reactor, 25 miles from New York City. The NRC gave Consolidated Edison, then the operator, a 12-month deferral on a steam generator tube inspection. And into that deferral, on February 15th, they blew a steam generator tube that caused a radioactive release. This was one tube burst, but these steam generators are they're anywhere from 6 to 10,000 tubes in each generator that can cause a cascading effect of failure if one or two or three of these tubes rupture. That's why these inspections are calendared and why they're required. But we've got 4 reactors right now that have deferred these inspections. At the same time, they're working the operators harder, which puts the risk of a operator error occurring in the event of a mechanical failure.
Right, and a lot of these operators are older people too, because Simpsons and everything else. This is not the hippest job to have these days. Paul Gunter with BeyondNuclear.org. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you. We'll be right back. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the place where despair is not an option. The Thom Hartmann Program. Back with your phone calls right after this. And welcome back. Maverick in Edmonds, Washington. Hey, Maverick, what's on your mind today? No Maverick. Let's try Kenyatta in Los Angeles. Hey, Kenyatta, what's on your mind today?
Well, I got to tell you that I think I'm being hounded by the same technological trolls that you are, and I want to thank you for your resolve. I've been trying to speak with you for a moment here. In any event,
okay,
what is going on in the United States right now is a portent of things to come. Something wicked this way comes, Tom. You see,
specifically
because I'm going to get specific. You know the origins and the resultant pathology of policing in the United States. It is a direct result of putting down slave revolts or black people that decided they would not be called boy and spat upon and so forth. That's exactly where it came from. And anybody can look that up. If you look at the various services in this country, it's a fire service. You're in the military, they say it's a service. But you talk about a police force. You see, it's always force. So while this country sits up and wrings its hands about COVID-19, you see, in black communities, we have something called the blue plague, and it's existed forever. You spoke earlier about this cop saying to this guy something about get up if you can't get up, something like that. Well, let me tell you something. There's something that cops have been doing long before body cams, and it's called keep saying stop resisting, stop resisting. Doesn't matter if the person handcuffed or detained is resisting. That is to cover their asses when the stuff goes down. Okay? So that's catch-all. And then I wanted to talk about things that come in threes. I keep seeing the media talk about, and by the way, it wasn't that guy. He had a name. His name was George Floyd. And he kept saying, now it's I can't breathe, I can't breathe. These chants, they become sensationalized by the media, but nobody talks about the other three words he kept saying. He kept saying, don't kill me. Don't kill me. You understand? We've got people now that have been cooped up for 90 days in Southern California almost, We've got triple-digit temperatures here now. You understand? This country is about to be in some stuff. About to almost screwed up there, Tom, that it is not ready for. You heard it here first.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're wrong, but I think my sense of it is that you're right, Kenyatta. And
Can I say something though, rather lighthearted, if I can,
certainly,
if it's possible?
You have a minute. Yeah.
Okay.
Half a minute.
You mentioned, and I know this about you, you had spent some time at a police academy, and you know this about me. So have I. But I got to tell you something. It was funny you talking about the dining room in this atrium. The police academy I went to was called the last high-stress police academy in the United States, and we ate lunch jogging in place for a half hour under baking 100-degree sun in Whittier.
Whoa. That's quite different. That's quite different than rural Georgia. Kenyatta, great talking to you. Thank you very much for the call. And you can check out Kenyatta's writings over at opednews.com, by the way. It's 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. Hey, Thom Hartmann here. I have a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream, and Ralph Nader wrote the foreword. It's available for pre-order wherever you find fine books. Welcome back. Rebecca in St. Michael, Minnesota. Hey, Rebecca, what's up?
Hi. I'm glad for the caller ahead of me because he gave part of my information. I'm calling from Minnesota with more clarification of the brutal murder of Mr. Floyd. It was actually a gang of police. The video that was released to the media showed one cop with a knee on his neck. Around the other side of the car was actually two more officers. He was handcuffed, laying on his stomach. One officer had his knee at his feet. Another officer had a knee at his thighs, and we saw the officer with the knee at the neck. And the fourth officer patrolled the sidewalk to keep people from interfering with the killing. And four officers
Has that gang of cops been arrested yet, Rebecca?
No, they haven't. And the four of them were fired. They are not on administrative leave. Right, and they have not been arrested. The local police say that what they will be doing is they want to see all the video that was taken that night, and they want to speak with all of the witnesses, and they want an autopsy report before they will make any further decisions. Now, if that was you or
Don't we typically arrest people when there's evidence of a murder and then investigate it? I mean, when it's right out in plain sight. I don't get why these guys are still walking around loose.
I don't either.
What am I missing here?
I don't know. And there's four of them, 3 accessory to murder and 1 murderer. So there's 4 of them, not 1 of them. And now the protesters are holding the cop with the knee on the neck hostage in his house because they've basically surrounded it. And even food delivery people are turning away because once they get there, they realized where they've come, and they aren't there to go in there, so they aren't able to get any food delivered or anything. I don't know if the guy's married or anything. Last night now, I was watching TV, and a news report came on, special news or whatever, or, break into the programming, and a peaceful protester on the sidelines was shot and killed. They found him laying on his back with from a bullet, and they do have a suspect in custody for that. But that's all the news that was told. This whole thing started, Mr. Floyd went into a grocery store and wrote a check, and for some reason the cashier thought that he was forging it or that it was a bad check, so she called the police. He was in the car with 2 other men of the same color, or I think it was men, it was 2 other people. Those people were allowed to just get out of the car and leave. They took him told him to get out of the car, handcuffed him, threw him to the ground, and that's how they held him down and killed him, just like that.
Yeah, this was an execution,
So, I mean,
also known as a lynching.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You said it. I wanted to. Yep. It was a brutal murder, and that's exactly what's going on, what we know here today and now. And I know that even the news at the top of the hour, and everyone's talking about one officer. 3 officers held that man down in handcuffs as he begged for them not to kill him, and then told him he couldn't breathe. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And 4 people walk into a bank and one of them shoots a teller. Typically, all 4 of them are charged with murder. It's
definitely.
Maybe I'm missing some subtle distinction in the law here, but I don't think so.
Exactly.
Rebecca, thank you for the call.
Police officers, and they had their cameras on. Supposedly, that's what I've heard. Is they did have their cameras on. I mean, they did this just because they can.
Yep. Well, not just because they can. Apparently, because they enjoy doing this kind of thing. It's an assertion of power, and it's a sickness among some of our police across the United States, and that is a function of, as Kenyatta said, and as I said an hour ago, the fact that policing in the United States grew out of the slave patrols, and in Europe, most of the policing came from a very, very different place. And, it literally, cops in Europe are there to serve. Cops here are there to enforce, as it were. Rebecca, thank you for the call. Peter in Lawton, Oklahoma. Hey, Peter, what's up?
Hi, this sad days for America. I'm going to make this short. After what this lady said, you remember the Selma marches and black and white TVs, we as kids watching the protesters go across the bridge on TV? My dad pointed at me and he says, son, America will not be destroyed by the commies. He said, it will be destroyed by some idiot starting a race war. And I'm beginning to believe that's what's happening today. We've got too many idiots.
Yeah, and that idiot's in the White House right now.
And yes. Yeah. And you know what? Did you see, I read this morning where he put out there, well, we need to kill Democrats. He got that from some wannabe cowboy down there in
and this cop who killed George Floyd had his picture taken with Donald Trump a few weeks ago wearing a T-shirt that said "Cops for Trump."
I saw that, and then now the right said, "Well, that's a different person." Now they're saying that's a different person. I've seen that also.
Okay, that may be the case. I can't assert it with absolute certainty. I did, I saw it.
The Republicans are treacherous. They're treacherous. They're even weaponizing the COVID. The state legislatures over there in Pennsylvania, they were meeting with Democrats knowing they had the virus, but didn't say a word about it.
Yeah, there was one particular guy, yes.
Yeah.
He had told the Republicans that he was symptomatic, and then he went and hung out with the Democrats. This is bizarre. Peter, thank you for the call. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be good to yourself and people around you. We all need to wake up. We need to share our stories. We need to share our outrage. We need to do something about these police killings. We've been saying that for the 16 years I've been doing this show. But in this particular time, where we're all locked in and we're all starting to feel, shall we say, a little on edge, let's put some special care into taking care of ourselves and those around us. And those who are not around us, caring for those who are hurt. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.